In the impeccably clean interior of the newly purchased camper, a man finds himself in the company of a strange, fluffy white owl. He stares out the window, frozen in shock, sweat streaming down his face as he tries to comprehend the incredible scene before him. As soon as the monster climbs out of the vehicle, it drowns everything in a roar multi-headed, with many eyes, and goes mad. Its giant claws tear the ground as it wildly races across the plains. Just 24 hours earlier, life was much more mundane. It all boiled down to a simple deal in the city. Saikyou stood beaming with pride as the professional dealer ceremoniously handed him the keys to his luxurious new mobile home, congratulating him on such an important purchase. He sincerely thanked him and admitted that a camper like this had long been his cherished dream. She handed him a small token of gratitude, a universal selfie stick. He examined the device and realized it could also be a reliable tripod, a smart addition for any traveler. The woman explained that documenting one's own journey had become a common practice for camping enthusiasts. There is now high demand for content about solitary overnight stays and picturesque locations. She advised him to use it to film his future adventures. In a burst of enthusiasm, he immediately suggested putting the new tripod to use to take a joint memorable photo in front of the van. She looked surprised by such a sudden proposal, but he insisted it would be a great way to mark the occasion. He proudly stands next to his new purchase, a dazzling white motorhome that casts a shadow along with him, and with the professional woman who handled the sale. Warming the dealer with a broad smile, he shows her a photo of the moment on his phone, and she responds with a polite bow and a word of thanks as they complete the handover. As soon as he settled into the driver's seat, his face lit up with pure delight. He firmly grips the steering wheel for the first time. A short, decisive turn of the ignition key, and the engine roars, sending a wave that courses through his entire body. The massive vehicle quickly drives away from the dealership. Its heavy frame glides smoothly, without jerks, as he begins his journey. His preparation for the road ahead is thorough. He stops at a specialized outdoor shop to gather everything necessary. He comes out with bags in his hands, and his gaze repeatedly fixes on the impressive view of the van parked nearby. The journey continues. The refurbished bus speeds along the highway, its long silhouette sharply outlined against the landscape. Eventually, he reaches Yadaraji Auto Campground, a picturesque mountain retreat, where he finds a spot among other campers and settles in for the evening. He relaxes in place. Suddenly, he takes a call from a stunned friend who cannot believe the scale of the purchase. The friend explains, it is a converted minibus, the largest size allowed by a standard license. And although the cost is a staggering 20 million yen, he is happier than anyone with his new mobile home. He recalls the exhausting years spent as a corporate slave, a toxic environment full of bullying and endless demands. During that hellish time, he worked like a draft animal, but the silver lining was that he was too busy to ever spend his earnings, and the savings quietly accumulated. After a decade of living minimally and cautiously investing every honestly earned yen, Saikyou finally reached the point where he can change his life. Sitting in his modest apartment, he admits, even if he is alone, this huge camper is a well-deserved reward for years of sacrifice and saving. With a new goal, he reaches out to an old friend, his voice trembling with excitement as he suggests recreating the camping trips of their youth. He recalls how they joyfully traveled together in the seniors' camper and says he really wants to bring back those carefree moments. And the response from the other side of the line becomes a cold reminder of the passage of time. His friend notes that they are all already adults. Many are married and raising children, so simply dropping everything and rushing into an adventure like in their student years won't work. Despite everything, Saikyou paints a vivid picture of that special freedom that a camper provides. You can cook and relax inside even regardless of the weather. He insists that the journey itself, the conversations, and laughter until they reach the destination will become a long-awaited escape from the monotony of daily life. He goes even further to sweeten the deal, promises to take on all logistics and equipment, and even invites their families. While he meticulously cleans the exterior of his new car, he waits for his friend to at least agree to pitch this idea to their old outdoor group. The conversation suddenly becomes easier. His friend, joking, asks if he is hallucinating from exhaustion because he cannot believe he really bought such an expensive car. He laughs out loud, confirms the purchase, and proudly says that he finally quit the job that had tormented him for years and kept him captive. When the plans for the next day of rest are already settled, he hangs up the receiver and heads to his dream property, a sincere smile of satisfaction on his face. He eagerly awaits to show his favorite camper and finally set off on the journey he has worked for decades. Finally, he reached the destination. The sleeping camper van stands calmly against the backdrop of motionless mountains and frozen lakes. Having entered inside, he surveys the impeccable interior of his new house on wheels, the result of a decade of sacrifices. The man exhales relief long and wearily, his eyes close as the burden of years of corporate hard labor finally falls from his shoulders. He cannot help but celebrate. He raises his fist up and reflects on how his exhausting work was finally not in vain. He lies on his back and realizes, earning money is important, but life without joy is like being buried in a pit. He plans to spend the night alone, and tomorrow meet friends, even dreams of the day when he will share this path with a partner or his own family. Suddenly, a dazzling white light flashes. It bursts from inside the space, devours everything around, and instantly erases the calm atmosphere. Suddenly stands up, trembling from surprise. A panic scream about being late bursts out of him even before he remembers. He is on a well-deserved vacation. He sinks back onto the pillows and complains about how deeply the habits of corporate life have ingrained themselves into his very soul, but still decides to relax for the rest of the day. His moment of silence shatters completely with a sudden realization or sound. Panics, jumps out of the van, and starts running. He runs around in front, and his eyes widen in disbelief at what he sees. The man freezes in place. His breath falters as he looks at the impossible, and his pupils dilate from pure, flawless shock. He jumped out of the van and found himself in the middle of a completely unfamiliar landscape. Instead of a campsite by the lake, ragged, gigantic peaks awaited him. Looking down, he asked himself where the lake had gone, firmly knowing that he had driven into an auto campground. Panic grew as he realized he had no memory of how he got to this abandoned, rocky wilderness. He was ready to grab at any answer. He looked at the phone. There was no signal. He abruptly turned to the van and pinned his hope on the vehicle's navigation. He hoped it would still work even where the connection was weak. He frantically poked at the screen, begging it to show where he was. Instead of a map, the display came alive with flashes of a strange interface. It showed that he had 10 points and was currently at level 1. There was a list of impossible functions from automatic repairs to vehicle storage, all the way to the water supply system. He stared at the screen, becoming increasingly lost as he tried to figure out those points and levels mentioned. It was not what he saw in the manual. All he wanted was a simple map to lead him home. A sharp, fiercer blow cracked against the van, something heavy slammed onto the roof, and the sound rolled through the entire cramped cabin. Fearfully, he stared through the windshield, and his heart pounded as he wondered what could possibly have fallen from the sky. He lowers his gaze to the small white creature writhing on the ground, its wings wildly beating against the dirt. And when he looks closer, he notices a foreign object deeply embedded in its feathers. It is because of this that the animal is suffering so intensely. While he recalls the warning that birds of prey are dangerous and unpredictable, the sight of the animal's suffering outweighs caution, and he decides that he simply cannot leave it to die. With careful precision, he presses the fluffy bird to his chest and quickly pulls out from it all this torment, a primitive wooden arrow. As soon as the projectile is removed, the creature lets out a sharp, painful cry, but in his hands it still barely moves. Seeing his foresight, immediately gathered the first aid kit in the van, applies a clean bandage to the wound. He speaks quietly to the bird and notes with a smile that such simple treatment made him much more comfortable. The bird suddenly takes flight, but does not flee into the trees. It circles and confidently lands on his shoulder, its claws gently gripping the vest. He continues walking along the path through the tall grass, amused by how the creature seems to reach out to him. He is surprised. Although people say owls never get attached to humans, this one seems truly grateful to him for his help. A sudden rustle in the dense underbrush stops him in his tracks. He understands that the arrow means the archer. Exhaustedly, he throws a greeting into the darkness and asks the owl to stay behind him in safety while he tries to determine where the noise is coming from. His heavy hammers strike the ribs as two nasty green-skinned monsters break out of the thickets. Waving crude stone knives and showing torn fangs, they emit a hoarse, fierce growl, and he freezes in fear. They rush forward with hoarse growls, fangs like torn blades bared in a predatory display. Saikyou recoils in fear, clutching a small white owl in his arms and jerking backward, vainly trying to break free from the reach of primitive attackers. He acts only on pure instinct. He struggles with the remote in his hand and presses the unlock button. With a mechanical whine, the side doors near the white camper van slide aside, revealing a sharp, metallic hideout from the intrusive chain. The heavy vehicle roars, tears off from the spot, and suddenly leaps forward, raising a cloud of dust as it speeds away from the clearing. Behind, two green-skinned creatures remain standing in the mud, their crude weapons raised in futile rage as the prey flees into the distance. Safe inside the cabin, he collapses into the driver's seat, his heart pounding like a hammer against his ribs. He stares wide-eyed at the monitor where the monsters vanish into the distance, while a whirlwind of feverish questions races through his mind. Are they aliens, underground dwellers, or some mythical creatures like Kappa? The camper abruptly retreats backward, and the engine's roar drowns out the sounds of the forest. At the forest edge, primitive hunters watch as the strange metal box disappears from sight, moving faster each time, and one of them still grips a bow that could do nothing against this speed. He grips the steering wheel tightly with trembling hands, his gaze flickering between the road ahead and the image on the rearview display. When the monsters finally vanish from the screen, a new wave of fear overwhelms him. He has no idea what these uncharted thickets are or how he ended up here at all. The white van makes its way along a forest path over uneven ground. The wheels crunch on dry leaves and twigs. The dense canopy overhead blocks the light, and as he sinks deeper into the unknown, long shadows continuously shift. Still noticeably anxious, he keeps a steady pace, his forehead shining with cold sweat. Nearby, the white owl sits quietly in place, its large eyes watching the man who just saved them both from inevitable bloody death. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his breath caught as the forest ahead exploded with a cacophony of cracking, the brittle wood breaking under pressure. Drops of sweat rolled down his face as he froze in fear, not knowing which nightmare beast would emerge from the darkness next. He heard the trees snapping like dry twigs, a sound that meant something huge was already approaching his location. Suddenly, a figure crashed down from the shelter above onto the ground, a blurred movement against the falling leaves. A warrior, blade drawn, descended and softly landed near the roof of the vehicle, as if watching this alarm from the very top. She was an elf, her pointed ears twitched as she carefully scanned the area with wide, focused eyes. Her face mixed icy determination with sudden shock when she saw the mechanical beast beneath her, like something she definitely did not expect to find amid this chaos. When she landed, the young man in the van could only freeze in complete silence. The ground trembled, and the forest belt bowed under the weight of something far larger than one warrior, confirming his worst suspicions about the source of the destruction. With a deafening roar that shook the very air, a huge multi-skulled monster burst through the thickets. It loomed over the elf and the strange metal carriage. Its jaws were agape, rows of tusked teeth and a limp tongue gaping ready to crush everything in its path. Instantly reacting, the elf woman began to draw a swirling vortex of energy between her palms, a mask of concentration frozen on her face. In the wagon, the driver screamed wildly from pure fear. His mind trembled at the incredible scale of the monster before him, and in a desperate plea for salvation, he began shouting. She unleashed the gathered force, a piercing beam of light that tore through the air with a sharp whistle. Its projectiles hit without fail. One aimed precisely and plunged deep into one of the creature's many eyes, and when the impact jerked the monster's head back, a dark ichor splashed from the eyes. The beast jerked back, a hoarse howl of pain tore from its throat as it grabbed its bloodied face. Seizing the chance, the warrior sharply landed on the ground, her hand firmly gripping the sword hilt as she prepared for the next stage of the fight, never taking her eyes off her enormous opponent. She tears forward with deadly precision, the blade drives deep into the monster's eye. Saikyou, without taking his eyes off, freezes in horror in the safety of the van, while the beast whines in pain and the dark ichor spurts from the wound. The mighty creature weakens, and with a deafening, thunderous crash flies into the ground, throwing up a wall of dust and debris just a few feet from the vehicle. Standing triumphantly on the body of the fallen titan, the warrior looks back, her face reveals nothing. In the van, Saikyou struggles with the reality of what he sees. His thoughts go wild at how terrifyingly true everything has become. He still does not let go of the steering wheel. A small white owl sits nearby silently while they gaze into the settling dust. Suddenly she breaks into a run towards the van, and her voice cuts through the silence as she orders him not to move. Saikyou flinches, feeling his heart wildly pounding under her sudden, aggressive pressure. Reaching the window, she leans in and presses against it with a sharp gaze, repeating the demand to stand still. Saikyou's eyes widen in disbelief, not only because of the proximity, but because she speaks perfect Japanese. Without any warning, her strength seems to evaporate, and she tumbles face first onto the ground right in front of the van. Saikyou watches from the driver's seat, wondering if the battle has finally finished her off or if she is gravely wounded. Carefully gets out of the car, approaches her lying figure, and calls to see if she is conscious. She lies motionless. The silence of the forest descends again while he stands over his mysterious savior. He hangs his gaze over the fallen warrior woman, and in his head feverishly running through options on how to classify her. Although she looks human, her long pointed ears hint at something entirely different. He goes through names from myths and legends, pixie, imp, fairy, until he stops at the word elf. Looking back at the ruins, he involuntarily admits, the trace of his disappearance here is undeniable. He sees the huge body of a beast, strange creatures with green skin, and a landscape that has no resemblance to any part of Japan he knows. When he looks at the unconscious elf, the truth just appears. This is not the world he came from. He freezes in place, cold sweat appearing as he tries to comprehend the impossible. Thoughts flicker in his head about multiversal reality or interdimensional flights, but for a situation he cannot truly grasp, it sounds like empty words. Alone between his van and the remains of a supernatural battle, he finally realizes, somehow he has wandered into a completely different world. Shouku carefully prepares a hot bowl of porridge from a spider retort, a warm expression on his face, and he watches as a white owlet sits on his shoulder. He is glad he can offer guests something truly tangible. The warrior woman takes a bite. Her eyelids tremble and close from pure bliss, and the warm food again gives her strength. This is definitely the tastiest thing she has eaten in these days. While she eats, she tells about the dire circumstances that brought her here, how a hunt that went awry ended in a clash with a dangerous creature. In the confusion, she lost all her gear and wandered for several days without a single piece of food and without a drop of water. He listens and feels the confusion growing, especially when she says that the first time she saw him, she thought, the monster is about to devour him. He understands. They speak the same language, but the context of her words is alien, as if they are from two different realities. He points to the huge metal machine behind him, asks if this is the monster she was talking about. She solemnly nods, says that now it looks asleep and quiet, but to her it is recognized as a formidable and dangerous creature. This revelation plunges him into deep thought. He rests his chin on his hand and freezes, because finally the weight of the situation falls on him. The fact that she perceives the camper van as a living being only confirms his suspicions. He really crossed the boundary into a world where common sense from his home no longer works. Breaking the silence, she politely nods and introduces herself, Gina. After that, she sincerely thanks him for saving her life for the food. He responds just as politely, naming himself Yoshioka Shouku, but immediately insists, let her just call him Shouku, so it would be simpler and more human between them. Then he cautiously asks if the name Japan means anything to Hera Hope for at least a crumb of familiarity. She shakes her head. She has never heard of such a place. And she also asks if Japan is the name of his native village, leaving him to digest the chasm of distance between their origins. He listens while she introduces herself, an elf from the village of Harem. While she speaks, he reflects on the strange nature that she can communicate, and he wonders if his camper van holds the key to returning home. His gaze lingers on her, and his thoughts race wildly, calculates the consequences of this new world and the mysterious girl standing before him. While she continues to eat porridge with such focused stubbornness, he cannot help but notice. Despite her military past, she is so sincere and straightforward. Suddenly she jumps back with a sharp scream, her body tenses, preparing for a fighting stance only out of instinct. She quickly apologizes, explaining that after days of fighting alone her reflexes are on edge, and he tries to calm her down by offering to take on the cleaning himself. She insists on washing the dishes herself. Her face is determined when she looks for any way to be helpful in exchange for his kindness. He looks at her with a warm smile, touched by her sense of duty. He raised his gaze to the small white owl sitting nearby and aloud wondered, did the camp person like her, or was she really capable of understanding his words? The owl replied with a quiet, knowing hootas if confirming his suspicions. Later he sits before the flickering interface of his vehicle's control panel. It displays a balance of 10 points and a list of available upgrades. He decides that it is time to test what this system is capable of and how it can help them. He studies various functions, navigation, repairs, and supplies, recording the cost of each in points. Realizing that resources are scarce, he understands. The next move must be chosen with utmost caution to survive in this unknown land. He starts by turning on the navigation system. The screen flickers and comes to life, showing a detailed map of Kodio Kingdom, ready to guide them through unknown terrain. With the active map, he shifts his attention to other vital necessity-selecting fuel and water supply functions. In this wild terrain, they are not up for discussion for survival, and he knows, without them, they cannot afford it. Despite the confirmation on the screen that supplies are automatically replenished, he inspects the cabin confused. Nothing changes, and he wonders if the system really works as intended. He examines the internal manometers and the water dispenser, but the levels do not change. Uncertainty gnaws at him as he questions when and how exactly these resources will manifest. Finally, the weight of the situation begins to press down, and he leans forward, swept away by a sudden wave of nostalgia. He is drawn to simple, straightforward camping trips from his former life far from the strange world and its demands. He shakes off the melancholy. He notices 7 points remain and finds a hiding option for the vehicle. The idea immediately appeals. Driving a huge camper through broken, unpaved forests will be terribly difficult, and driving the car into a cave is a colossal advantage. He carefully reads the activation instructions. It is strangely simple. Raise both hands to that vehicle and say the command. He cannot help but feel a slight doubt because of how magical it sounds. Having reached the edge of the dense thickets, sparsely marked by trails, he decides to test the theory in practice. To his complete surprise, as soon as he gives the command, the huge camper van disappears in a flash of light and he is left standing alone in the clearing, with only a small white owl nearby. He froze and stared at the empty spot where the huge machine had stood just a moment ago. Panic crept in as he realized the predicament he was in, what to do now that his only shelter had vanished into thin air. Remembering the order, he sharply thrust his hands forward and shouted for the vehicle to turn around. Nearby, the small white owl watched him with wide, inquisitive eyes as he tried to bring the magic back. A sudden heavy boom and the camper reappeared in that spot, its solar panels gleaming in the rays. He exhaled through the shock and could not believe it. Such a function was simply incredibly useful. It was truly impressive. The elven warrior with wide-open eyes looked at the display. Her previous suspicions melted away, giving way to deep respect. She concluded that he must be a master summoner. Only such a person could call forth such a huge creature in an instant, and she bowed her head, sincerely thanking him for his help. She continued, aloud marveling that he even walks paired with the great forest owl. He glanced between the bird and the warrior, and his confusion only grew as he realized. This tiny creature weighs much more in this world than he could have imagined. With a new, higher degree of formality, she addressed him, Lord Saikyou, a title that completely threw him off balance. Even the owls seemed to acknowledge the change in tone. They let out a quiet hoot as the warrior's gaze sharpened, suddenly focusing into a hard, flashing vigilance. Without warning, she drew a bladed steel streaked and struck at a small object, hidden or perhaps simply thrown. He flinched at the sudden harshness of the movement, his gaze fixed on the glowing ring that now lay right before him. She strode away with a confident step, and he called out to her, anxiety ringing in his voice. He rushed after her, pleadingly asking if he had accidentally offended her or stumbled somewhere, and what exactly could have provoked such a sharp reaction. She dashed off with blinding speed, but the threat had not yet receded. Suddenly, right before their eyes, a huge goblin with green skin loomed. Its maw was agape, foul saliva dripping from its mouth. Saikyou shuddered from pure shock. His brain was in a frenzy. Where did this green monster come from? Without any pause, the warrior's blade swept a deadly, shimmering arc. The goblin's head was severed. In an instant, dark blood splattered into the air. Calmly, she said that these creatures are scavengers. They are drawn by the sharp smell of monster corpses, while her companion watched in horror. As soon as the first attack fell, another goblin leapt from a high embankment. Its crude weapon was a beam for a deadly strike. Saikyou barely managed to see the new attacker, but his companion was already ahead. Her hand flared, and she prepared for a counter-strike. A sudden gust of sharp magical energy flew through the air and tore diagonally through the leaping goblin before it could land. The beast thudded backward, and its body was like a sieve full of holes as it crashed to the ground. Within seconds, the remains of the fallen goblins began to decompose, dissolving into strands of black smoke that vanished with the wind. Saikyou froze in place, his wide eyes burning with shock. The battle had ended so quickly and mercilessly. Sudden cruelty was washed away by heavy silence broken only by the steady rhythm of rain dripping down. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The immediate threat just passed, and in the wet clearing remained only those who had survived. Returning to her companions, Gina suggested setting out before new marauders arrived. She laid out her plan to return to Harem village, naming it the nearest settlement and refuge, where comparatively fewer monsters plagued the wild lands. Then she handed the young man an official invitation, calling him her savior and inviting him to join. Saikyou weighed all options. Perhaps the village held the keys to understanding this strange land, or even a chance to find a way back to his own world, while the white owl watched him intently with knowing eyes. He asks if the little white owl can go with them, and she warmly agrees, gladly accepting them both on her journey. Suddenly she stumbles and falls to her knees, her body trembling. He rushes over swiftly, anxiously asking if she was injured during the previous fight. A rumbling hum bursts from within her body, spreading silently across the clearing. He and the owl freeze, watching in stunned silence envelops them as the true cause of her fall becomes clear. Choking with shame, she hides her face and apologizes for such an unworthy spectacle. He quickly calms her down, understanding that she hasn't eaten anything for several days, and offers his portable rations. They are at hand. While they prepare to set off, the sky darkens, and a heavy downpour lashes the desert landscape with stone columns. He retreats to the safety of his car and, standing by the window, watches her standing alone in the rain, while nearby the truck engine sputters. Looking at her through the glass, he sees. She was pulled closer and the raised hood soaked through from the storm, and the silhouette is very tiny against the gray sky. He calls her, offering to hide inside the van where it is dry, but she politely refuses and says she is used to the rain and has already regained her strength. Then he asks how much longer they have to travel to reach the village. He continues running through the rain, listening to the elf talk about the path ahead. She says, the horse would have reached Harem village in 1 day, but on foot it will take them 2.5. A pang slips into her voice when she remembers the horse she lost during the monster attack. Along the long road ahead, he urges her to come inside. He explains that the transport is fast and will hide her from the rain. He warns, the cold will only drain her strength. She quietly thanks him but still does not enter. Despite his invitation, she hesitates, her face clouds with a fear that sits deep inside. She says he trusts her, but the very thought of going inside what looks like the belly of a huge beast terrifies her. He looks at her and finally understands. Her refusal is not about him, but about the strange machine he calls home. She continues to explain her conflict. She says she is grateful for the food he gave her, but feels a natural hesitation about entering the private space of a stranger she has just met. In response, he moves forward with renewed strength, dismissing her remarks and insisting that she has nothing to worry about. He will gladly accept the person who saved him. He tries to calm her down, saying this transport is not for fear, but a tool created specifically to make the long journey pleasant. He begins listing the numerous conveniences hidden in the metal walls, how you can cook food there, sit comfortably, stretch your legs, and even sleep soundly. When he mentions that the shower washes away dirt and the fatigue of the day, she looks at him with wide-open eyes. Such an idea is completely foreign to her. When the strange cart rolls across endless open spaces beneath giant mountains, the true essence of their journey becomes clear. It is a vessel of absolute freedom. It can take them anywhere they want, whether by a familiar path or to an uncharted border. He concludes the explanation by saying that inside they are safe from biting insects and wild animals of the night. Let it be hot during the day and freezing at night. Inside it still remains a shelter of comfort from bad weather. He continues his speech, gesturing inside to emphasize how spacious it is there. He says there is enough room for several people and imagines it as a sanctuary where moments with family and friends can be preserved. Looking out the window and beaming with a smile, he briefly summarized the essence of the machine, calling it simply a house on wheels. Suddenly his face twitched and he realized. The weight of reality settles on him. He slumps against the steering wheel. He starts twitching because of the dangers of this world, imagining what will happen if monsters appear, and berates himself for the water and fuel supplies melting away and the unstable power supply. Watching him closely, the elf notices the deep attachment he clearly feels to this strange metal companion. He catches her gaze and immediately anxiety tightens. He fears that his outburst of technical warnings has pushed her away. But she gives a soft smile, her eyes warm, as she considers his story about the mobile home for loved ones, and comes to the thought that this idea is truly wonderful. He breathes a sigh of relief when she accepts it. He turns back to the window and watches the rain hitting the glass, while a small white owl lies nearby. He peeks out from the driver's seat, just as the morning light breaks through the dense canopy, and snatches the clearing from view. Their strange journey has stopped. He raises his eyes to the gap in the sky, and quietly notes what sudden beauty and it confuses him as he peers through the window, while nearby on the edge sits a small fluffy owl. Above them the skies are cut by dazzling streaks of light, casting celestial glow on the rocky mountain peaks and on the solitary vehicle parked below. For a moment he freezes, captivated by the spectacle, and whispers his delight into the empty air. Nearby she slowly lowers her hood, and the cold morning air touches her face as she surveys the landscape. Her expression softens. A faint blush colors her cheeks as she turns back to the window. Addressing him with formal respect, she admits that fear still lives in her heart, but she hopes someday he will truly take her with him on his travels. He immediately and fervently responds affirmatively. His face lights up with a genuine smile. He is just beginning to add another thought, and his excitement is mirrored by the calm presence of a white owl nearby. He leaned further out the window to bridge the gap between them and suggested they drop the formalities. Just call him Shajido. She hesitates, seeking confirmation, so he adds, then he on his part will simply call her Gina. A bright smile flashes on her face as she tries to say his name for the first time. She is enveloped by a new sense of togetherness and speaks from the heart, hoping for their future together is how a true couple is born. She accepts the new terms of their relationship with a warm, formal greeting, but the sudden leap in intimacy proves too much for the traveler. A wave of shame suddenly overwhelms him. He hides his face in his hands and thinks about how awkward he feels that the younger woman addresses him so casually. She notices his distress and asks what happened, and he quickly brushes it off. trying to recover while the dealer watches from the driver's seat. As they continue to make their way through the jagged snow-covered peaks of the mountain ridge, his thoughts turn inward. He admits that his desire to return to his original world has not changed, and one cannot deny that this land impresses with its cold beauty, and more importantly, he realizes that he is still capable of finding deep, genuine connections with others, a part of himself he feared he had long thrown away. This moment of silence and new hope, however, was tinged with belated fear. Later, he would bitterly look back on that calm morning and feel a heaviness in his heart, for at that time, he had no idea how terrible events were already waiting for him the next day. The camp falls silent. The elf warrior sleeps soundly on the ground, unaware that the young man and his fluffy white owlet are watching him from the safety of the campervan window. Eventually, he succumbs to fatigue, finds relief in the warmth of his bed, decides to postpone daytime worries, and sinks into sleep. A loud scream breaks the silencito, wake everyone upend, along with it a frightening sight. A huge, eyelidless eye looking down from above directly at the camp. She frantically shouts a warning for him to move, but he reacts slowly, blinking in confusion at the sudden urgency and asks, what the hell could be wrong? Before he can move, a monster looms over him, ugly, many-eyed, many-rooted. It is massive, covered with humps, and its large, clumsy hand is frozen in a pose to crush everything in its path. The beast's fist crashes down with fierce force-ed blow, shatters the silence, and throws him into a state of complete, paralyzed shock, until the ground beneath him is wiped from sight. He jerks awake and sharply gasps for air, waking up. The terrible image of the monster still burns in his memory as he realizes it was only a dream. When the reality of the nightmare settles in his head, he begins to doubt whether he is really safe. There is a strange, heavy weight lying on the blankets, and the sensation is too plausible. He suddenly sits up, breaking free in horror, his eyes widening as he comes face to face with a huge, white-feathered creature looming over his bed. Caught in shocked amazement, he is tormented by the thought, do the owls of this world really grow to such gigantic sizes in just one night? While he watches, the creature suddenly begins to shrink, and in a matter of seconds, returns to its small, fluffy form. He doubts whether the bird is some kind of monster, but becomes even more confused when he realizes that the wounds he suffered yesterday have completely disappeared. He steps out of the strange metal wagon under the morning light, carrying a bundle of bedding, and looking back at the silence in the deserted clearing, wondering where his companion has gone. Soon she appears from behind the forest belt, approaches him, and meets him with a grateful smile. She thanks him for the borrowed blankets. She admits that she decided to sleep outdoors again because she still feels a shadow of anxiety when she has to enter the cramped cabin of his car. Radiating energy wildly, she exclaims that she has never slept so soundly before but immediately stops herself, realizing that falling into such a deep sleep in the wild is a dangerous mistake. She explains that her usual routine is to sleep on branches or on hard ground, covered only by a cloak, to stay alert to the slightest movement of predators. Noticing her slight limp, he asks if she hurt herself while gathering the herbs she now holds in her hands. She brushes off his concern, insisting it is just a minor scratch and a small price for the healing plants she found to repay his kindness. She admits that the clash with the monster yesterday left her with some pain and swelling in her leg, but she assures that it will not prevent her from walking. He suggests finding a compress or medicine that will help her recover. Her stomach emits a thunderous growl, breaking the serious mood and leaving her confusedly blushing. She quickly apologizes, promising to immediately find something to eat while he looks at her with a gentle, understanding smile. Seeing her hunger, he offers to take the helm, asks if she will allow him to prepare a dish from the ingredients she gathered. She freezes, explaining that after she lost her tools along with the horse, she only planned to wash and fry the food, but he assures he can make it much tastier. The warrior is silent. Her eyes are wide open as she processes his unexpected offer of culinary skill. After her silent agreement, he returns deeper into his strange dwelling ready to start cooking. As soon as he goes inside, he is pleasantly surprised. The water tank is full, and the fuel was replenished overnight. A lightness in his souled vessel is sustaining itself, and even the little white owl seems to acknowledge this with a soft hoo. He lays out the reward, brings various mushrooms and mountain vegetables. He places them next to his supplies of pasta and broth. He carefully examines the local flora, noticing how it resembles familiar ingredients, mushrooms and yams. Although this is another world, he trusts her hunting expertise regarding their safety, accepting that he will have to adapt to local food if he wants to survive and wait for the moment when he finds a way home. He starts the cooking process, puts the pasta to boil, and immediately begins working on the mushrooms, cut into small pieces. The two-burner stove in his cramped kitchen becomes a real salvation while he prepares the consommé in a separate pot. Continuing his work, he energetically kneads the mountain yam until it becomes perfectly viscous and sticky. When the pasta is almost ready, he transfers it into the boiling consommé, allowing the flavors to merge for the final boil. At the end, a steaming bowl of consommé soup pasta, topped with a delicate portion of grated yam. This is a dish specially prepared to restore strength and soothe the fatigue of their journey. While the rich aroma fills the air, he pauses and enjoys the scent, noticing the little white owl watching him intently. He kindly offers to share the meal with the fluffy creature. Outside the van, two companions settle at a modest table under the open sky. The transition from the cramped kitchen to the vast wild space emphasizes the strange comfort of their temporary camp. The elf warrior looks intently at the unfamiliar dish, and his gaze mixes curiosity and hesitation. He explains that the best way to enjoy it is to take a spoonful of soup along with all the other ingredients. When she takes her first bite, she is immediately overwhelmed by a sensation she had never known before. The texture of the pasta and the richness of the broth make her eyes widen and take her breath away. She tries to comprehend such culinary mastery. She eats with newfound enthusiasm, and her thoughts race to identify the spices that could have created such a deep, complex flavor. She marvels at how the mushrooms she gathered herself have transformed. Their earthy taste perfectly complements the unique, sticky texture of the yam. She beams with delight, praising him both as a master chef and as a summoner. He responds with a smile, genuinely glad that his dish brought her so much joy, while nearby a small white owl chirps happily. The little creature continues pecking at its food, and she watches this with a soft, grateful expression. He observes them both and feels satisfaction. The quiet moment of shared pleasure has finally worked. Next to the large white transport that serves as their mobile home, the team sits around the table outdoors. The dealer stands nearby, surveying the peaceful atmosphere of the camp as they finish their meal. He understands the simple pleasure sharing a meal with others remains the same, no matter what world one finds oneself in. Beside him, she continues savoring the lingering flavors of the dishes, a gentle smile on her face. She formally thanks him for the feast, and sincere gratitude rings in her voice. He demurs, noting that it is the local ingredients mushrooms and mountain yam that make the dish truly special. Nearby, a fluffy white owlet is already dozing off its belly full. He casts a glance at the creature with faint anxiety. Was it wise to feed it human food, considering how different it is from what he knew at home among owls? Gina shifts the conversation to the mysterious bird and asks about its connection to the forest owl. She recalls how he saved it from green-skinned monsters, and how since then they have never been apart for a moment. She explains that these creatures are highly revered as rare monsters. They protect crops from pests and are even honored as divine messengers. Shaidru listens, stunned. He had no idea that his little fluffball, whom he had so far regarded so carefreely, holds such a prestigious and sacred status here. He pondered the intelligence of the being, having no idea whether it truly understood his words from all that it had in its history of helping people. Gina froze with delight, marveling that the forest messenger could communicate so clearly. Continuing the thought, he asked if he should also adopt the formal title forest owl, but the bird's skeptical expression made it clear. It wanted something closer to itself. He realized that simply calling it owl forever was too boring. He began naming possible names. Hedwig, Minerva, Kepra, and each of his hints was met with complete indifference by the fluffy creature. Given that he does not like grand titles, he quietly laughed and suggested something much simpler: foot up. He watched as the name echoed immediately. The owl fluttered its wings and gave a series of joyful hoots, confirming its agreement. He was amused that such a simple name was exactly the one that ultimately won her over. Gina slightly bowed her head, accepting the new name for divine messenger, then showed that the sun was high in the sky, time to resume the journey. Before them stretched endless open steppes up to distant, jagged mountain peaks under a clear sky. Sitting behind the wheel again, he noted that the terrain had become much flatter, and when they finally got onto the well-trodden main road, their journey noticeably eased. He gets out of the driver's seat and calls to Gina, asking if she still has fear of that huge creature they are driving with. In response, she hesitates for a moment, her face softening as she considers the questioned primal terror that overwhelmed her begins to recede, transforming into something entirely different. She begins to recall the previous night, says that the bed was unexpectedly comfortable, but there was another reason for the peaceful sleep. He watches her closely, interested in this sudden change of mood. Next to the bulky figure of the machine, she explains her discovery. It turned out that this monster nearby does not scare her. Instead, it becomes a protection that allows her to lower her guard. His eyes widen slightly at her words. He feels surprise at the unexpected trust she places in him and his companion, who was called after. She explains in more detail. Supposedly, it appeared only because he called it, and that little Fuda is present with him, so now the once terrifying creature looks calm, gentle, and extremely reliable. With sincere regret in her gaze, she apologizes for her initial hostility and for trying to hit him when they first met. Then, with a hint of hope, she asks if she may join them on this journey, since her fear has disappeared. She allows it, giving a warm smile, and assures that even the transport seems to rejoice at her appearance. She is overwhelmed by a wave of gratitude. She shines. Her eyes sparkle as she officially joins the group, and the camera on her shoulder chirps joyfully. He shudders in fright when the little white owl suddenly starts wildly flapping its wings and squeaking in the cabin with urgent fuss. He leans slightly toward the excited bird. He asks what caused such a commotion, but when his gaze slides over the landscape through the window, he sees nothing but dense green forest. Turning back to the warrior for an answer, he asks if she sees anything. Her face hardens, and she calls his name, confirming a dangerous monster is already nearby. A section of the path crumbles into fragments as a giant creature resembling a moose crawls out of the forest. Its eyes glow, its fangs are sharp, it looms over the trail. It roars, hot breath bursts out in a whirlwind, thick clouds of steam rise into the air, and the beast's eye, like a sight, fixes a predatory gaze on the transport. Trembling, he notes that this creature, though smaller than the titans they dealt with before, is no less terrifying. The warrior recognizes the beast as a deacon warns. Its size is deceptive, its strength is deadly, and it could turn into a disaster if they are attacked. So he suggests trying to sneak around it while it sits quietly. She watches the beast with growing anxiety, noticing it has already taken a posture of pure aggression and is ready for immediate confrontation. Without warning, the monster emits a deafening, bone-chilling roar, displaying rows of blade-like teeth, a clear, undeniable challenge of hostility. Before them looms she, a creature that usually stays away from main roads and remains obedient until provoked. Genome explains, this beast behaves unusually excitedly, so fleeing in a car is a vain hope. Its speed far exceeds that of a horse, and it will relentlessly chase them regardless of the terrain. She draws the blade with a sharp metallic clink, ordering Saikyou to be absolutely still and silent. He watches her. His face darkens with fear and uncertainty as the weight of what is happening finally sinks in. The warrior stands firm, and her resolve hardens as she vows to protect Saikyou and the rest of their group. With weapons ready, she prepares to face the monstrous onslaught head-on. Suddenly, the beast lunges forward with terrifying speed. Its huge body becomes a continuous slick motion of fur and muscles. From a safe spot in the transport, Saikyou can only watch in shock as the creature closes the distance in an instant, its speed mocking its own weight. She meets the strike with a high-speed maneuver. She bursts into the air and hits the monster right in the head. The impact is harsh, a testament to the elf's agility against the brute force of D. The strike echoes as her sword cuts into the thick skin of the creature, but the beast barely flinches. Its shining eyes are fixed on the prey, pure, deadly determination. Having landed smoothly, she quickly takes position without lowering her vigilance as the battle intensifies. The ground trembles with every movement of the monster. Her eyes widen sharply, a sudden alarm as Deke delivers a powerful blunt strike, and his huge hooves tear the ground and dig into the soil with bone-breaking force. The scale of this might reveals itself so terrifyingly clearly. She barely avoids being fatally trampled by the giant creature. The ground cracks under its weight. Under such pressure, she does not lose focus. She pushes through the chaos and prepares a corresponding strike, releasing a burst of magical energy. The warrior's movements falter. A sharp pain pierces the leg, and it involuntarily twists in pain. From a safe spot in the car, Saikyou immediately calls out anxiously and asks what happened, but she quickly brushes off his concern. She says the leg is just not okay, and she needs a moment to apply a bit more bandage. He helplessly watches, while his thoughts frantically search for any way to help, as Deke continues his relentless assault. The elf is driven outside into a desperate dance of survival. He barely manages to slip under the giant, grasping jaws of the creature lunging forward at terrifying speed. A sudden thought overwhelms him as he looks at the tablet and wonders if a specific function can shift their luck. With a decisive exclamation, he starts memorizing the targets on the screen, activating the machine's hidden feature to turn the tide of battle at any cost. He grabs the steering wheel with new determination, roars Gina's name, and declares he is going to her aid as soon as he crashes the car right into the side of the towering monster. The windshield frames this bloody commotion ahead. The beast rises too close, not yet knowing that the metal beast brother is about to enter the fight. Saikyou exits the camper van holding a small container, while Fuda lingers in the background. For now, Gina is in a desperate maneuver, sliding on the ground to dodge the attack. She understands she must draw the beast away from her companions, but even when a giant beast monster looms behind, heavy steps thunder on the ground, shaking it. The warrior woman shouts, her voice trembles with despair as she tries to keep her distance from the creature. Suddenly, Saikyou appears on the car roof. He grabs and slaps metal lids, bangs them against each other, and shouts at the top of his lungs to lure this big idiot to him. The monster, irritated by the noise, turns its predatory gaze away from Gina and rushes toward the van. He activates the team with a decisive shout and the machine tenses, preparing to strike, while he jumps aside, escaping. The giant beast slams its huge hoof with all its might into the camper's roof so hard that the bones should shatter, and the shockwave spreads around. Its weight is so colossal that the wheels of the vehicle sink into the soft ground so deeply that Gina remains staring, eyes wide open in complete shock. She watches in horror as a huge, deep monster crashes down with all its weight on the camper van, and the ground trembles from the impact force. The young man understands the plan is working. Because the handbrake was not pulled, the van rolls like a toy under the beast's paw, but the roar of the creature, so deafening, shakes him and the little white owl from pure terror alone. Due to the lack of friction, the huge hoof of the creature slides straight off the roof of the vehicle, and it wildly jerks as soon as it completely loses support. Momentum drags the beast forward, and it crashes face first into the ground with a thunderous roar, while the survivors freeze in place, watching as the once terrifying threat collapses into a heap of fur and muscles. When the gunpowder begins to settle, the monster lies motionless on the forest floor, allowing Saikyou to approach his battered vehicle and bitterly note, the solar panels are broken, and the roof is firmly dented. He takes a moment to breathe, his face pales from the ordeal, while the radiant interface inside the van confirms. The emergency body reinforcement protocol worked, providing the necessary structural strength to survive the trampling. Then he turns to his companions and bows low a gesture filled with deep regret, lamenting that he had to rely on their strength, even though he promised to protect them. But the elven warrior immediately rejects his apology, insisting that without him, they would not have endured or survived. Then she gestures toward the vehicle. Her curiosity ignites a persistent, stubborn mechanism and asks if it is his acquaintance, leaving him momentarily speechless due to a cultural misunderstanding about his modern transport. She repeated the name with barely noticeable confusion, her brows furrowing as she tried to make sense of the word. Saikyou quickly explained, it is simply the name he gave his companion, so she involuntarily hesitated, wondering if it was an abbreviation of a much longer, more formal title. Seeing her acceptance of this idea, he realized, she truly believes that the transport is alive, familiar in some sense as a being, because the vehicle had capabilities far beyond local understanding. He decided not to break this misunderstanding, and eventually invited her inside the beast so she could see for herself. He officially introduced the two, declaring that from now on the vessel would be called Campy. Relieved that the monster seemed unharmed, she waved off the external damage, saying it was nothing serious, just a few crumpled panels. A smile returned as the tension finally eased. Standing before the colossal fallen Deke, she noted that she had never actually seen it devour anything, and suggested that if the monster were fed its own meat, it could regain strength. Saikyou shuddered not only from the advice itself, but also from the revelation. The flesh of this creature is considered high-quality, nutritious delicacies. He explained, while her hunt was interrupted by the monster's appearance, she needed to take the trophies of victory with her. He offered to use the transport storage to carry the huge haul, and she immediately agreed, preparing to begin the collection. With practiced ease, she gets to work cutting into the thick skin and muscles on the monster's leg. When the storage space inside the transport began to reach its limit, she was surprised to estimate how much it could hold, yet still feared that leaving the rest of the meat behind would be wasteful. Saikyou, watching her work, suddenly recalled the very function he had seen earlier, the infinite storage capacity that could solve their problem. He turned to the internal interface and saw only 3 points left for upgrades. Automatic repair really wanted to turn on to patch external damage, but infinite storage would cost 2 points, so he had to choose what was more important, utility or maintenance. He listens while Gina explains the colossal value of the Deke monster. Its meat, skin, and horns will sell for big money and bring joy to everyone in her village. And then he finally understands how much the people from her home mean to her. Holding his gaze with soft melancholy, she admits that she has no family of her own. Because of her loneliness, she continues, it was the villagers who showed her true kindness, and now she feels a deep, relentless need to repay this debt in any way she can. He watches her stunned by the weight of her gratitude. Feeling the heavy atmosphere she created, she quickly apologizes for touching on such personal matters, but he gently assures her there is no need to worry. He freezes a quiet understanding, crosses his face, as he comprehends the depth of her connection to her community from. Suddenly ignited with determination, he orders her to wait a moment and goes to consult with Campy, leaving her standing in slight surprise. Turning to the interface, he selects the infinite storage upgrade. It promises not only limitless cargo space, but also a time stasis that stops time inside the compartment as soon as the doors close. The camper van cobber stands ready. Unnoticeable from the outside, it hides inside an infinite, timeless void capable of carrying back to the village the full weight of their loot. Shidru opens the camper's rear doors and checks with the navigation system that this is indeed the correct entrance. Inside the cramped compartment, a dark, swirling vortex hums, emitting strange magnetic energy. He realizes the upgrade works perfectly and encourages Gina, let her bring bigger pieces of the beast. She remains silent, stunned, while a huge piece of meat effortlessly stretches into the boiling abyss and disappears instantly. She effortlessly lifts a giant horn and asks if such a large trophy will fit. She only freezes in delight. How vulnerable the elf has incredible physical strength, yet easily handles the heavy trophy. When the giant horns are pulled into the tiny hole, she asks with wide-open eyes if the machine just ate it. He explains, this is the unique power of the camper. It can store an incredibly large volume of cargo, regardless of its physical size. He suggests dismantling the rest of the creation so they can transport all the meat and valuable hide. She eagerly agrees and says with deep gratitude that his help has secured such a vital resource for her people. Joining forces, they set to work under the open sky, carefully removing the skin and chopping up the huge creature to prepare it for transport. Step by step, huge parts of the monster are pulled into the storage compartment in the van, searching for the laws of physics as they disappear through the small hatch into the boundless space inside. When they completed the task, they disassembled it. She takes one last look at the clearing where the battle took place before joining him in the car cabin ready to set off back to her village. She leans out of the window while moving, her wide-open eyes burning with the thrill of the road, and the wind lashes her hair. They overcome the treacherous terrain. The young man steps forward and leads the huge machine through the narrow mountain pass, raising his hands to show the way. Eventually, the couple stops near the cliff, goes out to admire the harsh beauty of the surrounding peaks, while a white owl circles overhead. When the sun begins to descend, casting long shadows over the valley, the camper continues a steady pace through the depths of the wild place. The elven warrior shines with joy inside the cabin, marvels at the incredible speed of the transport, and bursts with excitement because she is carrying monster meat as a gift for a girl named Irina. She explains, Irina is a gentle, cheerful girl who has been feeling unwell lately and hopes that the nutritious, slow-cooked meat will be exactly what she needs to regain her strength. He listens carefully to her story, nods and agrees. It is necessary to get to the village as soon as possible to deliver urgently needed aid. She suddenly points forward with a cry of delight as the village finally appears beyond the road, and he silently sinks into thoughts of hope. This first encounter with a human settlement might suggest how to return to his world. He approaches the rural settlement, a cluster of wooden buildings nestled against a rocky backdrop and hidden behind a sturdy fenced enclosure. Above everything, the watchman shades his eyes from the light, squinting as he examines the approaching figures until his face contorts in utter shock when he recognizes the travelers. Seeing familiar faces, the elven warrior woman vigorously waves her hand and calls out to Eben and Belk that she has safely returned to the village. In response, two men leap down from their posts and, racing across the open field, run to meet their long-absent comrade with relief. When they reach her, she recounts the terrible journey, recalling encounters with both Mudivora and Deke, and explains her survival by those she accompanied so much so that the watchman cannot believe it. Stepping forward, the young man introduces himself as Shigeru, but the guards Eben and Belk look him over with clear skepticism, noting his slender build and unusual clothing compared to their rough gear. Hearing their doubt, she quickly intervenes and insists he is a powerful summoner with incredible culinary skills. The guards remain stunned how cooking is even related to their survival in the wild. He is eager to show even more of his wonders. She asks if he can introduce them to the camp company, and he can only respond shyly, confused at her inexhaustible energy. She brings the massive boxy transport up to the stunned sentries, who barely believe the scale of the metal beast before. Two men, even Belk, freeze in shocked stupor. Their mouths gape as they try to understand whether this is some rock golem or a strange new ally. In response to their confusion, she explains that earlier they encountered Deke and used this campy to bring the killing back to the village. Eben still doubts. He cannot believe such a creature can be moved without effort. Maybe they only brought one limb. Put an end to the dispute. The rear part of the car sharply tilts and a whole icy mountain of processed meat falls out, causing the guards to recoil in shock. They are completely overwhelmed. They realize that the entire deek was indeed returned, intact, a feat that seems impossible. Seeing their shock, she beams with pride and explains that this is the true power of Shidru and his tamed Campi. The guards immediately change their tone. They bow their heads and apologize for their previous disrespect, now perceiving the young man as a master of great skill. Word about the incredible Great Hall spreads through the settlement like wildfire, and very quickly a crowd gathers to marvel at the huge food supplies and the mysterious guest who helps secure them. While the villagers discuss the monster controlled by the newcomer, he is overcome with a wave of relief. Strangely grateful, apparently, their ideas about magical creatures are flexible enough to accept motorized transport without undue suspicion. He watches as a young girl named Irina rushes out of the village. Her face lights up with relief as she fiercely embraces Gina. The girl was panicking, but the elf gently calms her. She is fine and everything is already okay. She promises the anxious child a feast that will satisfy everyone and recalls the huge catch of meat they brought. The child's eyes flash with disbelief and hunger, and the elf laughs, enjoying a moment of silence after the long journey. His face remains calm, but a momentary sadness passes through his eyes as he looks at the united community and the simple joy of their reunion after separation. He listens silently while the guards, Eben and Belk, shift their gaze to him and ask if he plans to stay in the village for long. He explains his situation, compares himself to a lost traveler trying to find the way to where he belongs, uncertain where his path will lead next. He immediately seizes the opportunity and asks if they recognize the name of his homeland, Japan. But the guards can only give him empty looks. They admit they have never heard of it and advise that although the village elder is well informed and often travels beyond the borders, even he may not have answers to what the stranger seeks. They stubbornly insist that he must stay and recover in the guest house despite the lack of any information. The guards do not allow any benefactor of the village to sleep outside. They insist hospitality is the least they can offer to someone who helped theirs. Their statement is met with a loud cheer as they announce a lavish feast in honor of Gina's return and the arrival of the new guest. He is bewildered by the sudden boisterous enthusiasm of the villagers, as soon as they begin to raise shouts and prepare for celebrations. Next to the increasingly loud bustle, she turns to him with a warm, sincere face and officially welcomes him to Hawkin Village. He catches her gaze and, for a moment, the burden of his journey seems to lighten thanks to her kindness and the promise of a safe place to rest. She watches the village of Hakim as it settles under the boundless starry sky. Its roofs are silhouetted against the backdrop of distant mountains. She follows the sounds of the celebration to the very heart of the settlement there. The festive atmosphere envelops, and the long table overflows with an abundance of local dishes and drinks. The warrior stands at the edge of the gathering and watches as the peasants tend to the huge grills. Thick pieces of meat sizzle and whistle over the open fire. She listens as the guards nearby laugh together, assuring the young traveler, there is enough for everyone here. They explain that part of the meat is kept for trade and there is plenty for the feast, and they insist he and his companion have earned the right to eat their fill. They watch as the meat reaches the perfect golden roast, and as the chefs begin cutting it into thick, juicy slices that release fragrant steam into the night air. Then the cooks placed before him a huge dish with a freshly sliced roast beef portion. The impressive size of the dish made his eyes widen in disbelief as he was urged to enjoy the food to his heart's content. He catches this luxurious, almost saliva-inducing aroma almost unbearable, and understands. The very smell is enough to fill the mouth with saliva. With great hopes, he prepares to take his first bite of the legendary deek meat. A small white owl impatiently settles on the wooden railing, its large eyes fixed on the spot from where a scent wafts so strongly that it makes the mouth water. The air is filled with the smell of fried juicy meat, stirring a deep hunger within the creature. Next to it on the table lies a thick piece of meat on a heated stone, sizzling and crackling as it cooks. Steam rises from the perfectly browned surface, carrying a rich aroma that has already enchanted the little bird. Shidru freezes before the first bite, briefly thanks and presses the knife into the steak, and then he is overwhelmed by an unexpected texture. Although the meat came from such a huge, lean creature, the blade passes through it with amazing ease. When the knife sinks deeper, the tender fibers seem to part and cut, releasing a new wave of juices. The meat looks incredibly juicy, much more tender than its coarse origin suggests. He finally tries it and the burst of flavor is so sharp that his eyes widen and his breath catches. This is wild, rich food, far better than any beef or pork he has ever known. The spicy essence seems to vibrate through his entire body. Eben watches with a connoisseur's smile and says the meat is incredibly high quality because this creature stored a huge amount of magical energy in its massive form. Caught by that tangible sensation, the young man asks if it is the magic they have that gives such a deep flavor. The experienced guard explains, magic flows through the bodies of all monsters, fueling their ability to breathe fire or harden like iron. Then he explains that magic is the very essence of life and power in this world. By consuming the flesh of such creatures, one can instantly drive away fatigue and even ease minor ailments. So it is a valuable source of vitality. Shounen listens attentively, his head spinning as he realizes the scale of the monster that provided this nourishing meal. Despite the short alarm about whether such strong food is safe for someone from his world, he still cannot stop, continues to eat and savor every crumb. Half a table opposite, Eben watches the youth's enthusiasm and smiles warmly and gratefully. His heart is filled with deep gratitude for the help Shounen provided. He looks into his bowl and even explains the lack of meat in their remote village this way. Usually, they see only tiny pieces in the soup. A big game like deer is rare, and the government usually takes most of any noticeable kill as taxes. He looks at the festive crowd. On the peasants' faces is genuine joy as they feast. The rare abundance of meat has turned the air into a true celebration, and he suddenly understands what their hunt means. Returns to the conversation. He listens as he even thinks aloud. Gina probably insisted on returning the whole monster just to feed the entire village. He quietly agrees, understanding the elf's hidden kindness. The warrior woman is in a wonderful mood, laughing, thanking him for fulfilling her request to transport the huge creature. Eben also joins the fun, loudly urging him to drink and enjoy the celebration without any hesitation. Their meal is suddenly interrupted by a joyful exclamation, and a young girl runs to them. She calls him familiar, warm. Her face is lit up by a broad smile. She offers him a bowl of soup and explains that she cooked it from the best vegetables from her family's gardenas, a thank you for helping Gina. Eben confirms, their garden gifts are truly the best in the village, further emphasizing the sincerity of this gift. But her bright smile quickly fades as she is overtaken by a severe coughing fit. He asks worriedly if she still feels unwell and even suggests going to her mother to rest. When the girl leaves, a venerable old man with a long white beard approaches the table. He addresses the young man with the utmost respect and asks if he is Lord Saikyou, a title that completely throws him off balance. He is chewing, still not having released the food from his mouth, when the village elder Libido finally introduces himself, apologizing for being late. He had to attend a meeting in the neighboring village. The elder expresses deep gratitude for the generous meat and furs, emphasizing how vitally necessary such supplies are for a remote settlement, but the young man insists that it was no trouble at all. Switching the conversation, he asks about the characteristics of elves, particularly about their long, pointed ears. He notes that Gina is the only elf woman he has seen since he arrived, and inquires of the elder about her origin and family history. The elder's gaze becomes distant as he recalls a time over 15 years ago when the village was inhabited only by humans. He describes the day when an elf woman named Martel arrived in the village, carrying the young Gina on her back. Although the villagers hesitated to approach a race they had never seen, they allowed Martel to stay after she begged for a place to live. She set up a home in a ruined stable and tirelessly raised her daughter, cultivating the surroundings and using her water magic to survive in isolation. She became an integral part of the village. With her unique gifts, she kept the community afloat. During droughts, she summoned water to irrigate the parched fields, and when a neighbor was injured, she was immediately there to wash and carefully bandage his wounds. This dedication was most evident on the night when fire threatened to mercilessly consume the village's winter supplies. She unleashed all her power to stop the raging flames before they turned their survival to ashes. However, this effort came at a tremendous cost. Although the villagers never fully understood the nature of her magic, it was clear such a feat drained all her life force. She fainted and did not regain consciousness for several days, leaving the community in tense, anxious vigilance. Over the years, the bond between the two elves and the villagers only grew stronger. They were no longer strangers. They shared meals, lived in a real home, and the local children included the young girl in their games as if she had always been part of their group. 7 years ago, this strong one and only peace was shattered. She was suddenly taken by a rare and relentless disease. Her death came quickly, and the village was unprepared to fill this void. After her death, the whole village mourned the loss of their protector and friend. They looked at the young orphan she had left behind, and all together vowed to raise her as their own so that she would never truly be alone. Turning to the present, the elder tells the guests, Despite their care, the girl still carries the heavy burden of alienation, pushing herself to be useful as if to justify her own existence among people. The young man listens attentively. Understanding appears on his face, and he admits that he knows exactly how such isolation feels. He reflects on the strange shadow of loneliness that can linger even when there is kindness around, on the feeling that you are essentially different, and it is this that drives you to work with despair, just to feel that you belong. He listens attentively as the elder explains the burden of Gina's inheritance. Being the only one in this village with such a gift, she could not help but feel a deep loneliness, same loneliness, born simply from the fact that she was different. Watching him, the old woman continues and expresses gratitude that it was exactly someone like him who took care of her. He notes that traveling with a forest owl means the man is not so simple. After all, these words completely confuse the young man, and the fluffy creature lets out its soft call, as if confirming its own significance. Then he gently pats the guest on the shoulder, announces that it is time for the elders to retire for the night, and invites the guest to stay and enjoy the evening. The young man thanks him, feeling the weight of the day's events upon him, while the little owl settles comfortably and perches on his head. Suddenly he was struck by a revelation. His eyes widened sharply in shock. He had surprisingly forgotten to ask the elder about his original world, although Eben had previously assured him that the village leader knew about the lands beyond their borders. Immersed in thoughts about the lost opportunity, he doesn't even manage to move when Gina approaches with a warm smile and asks if he likes the celebration. He immediately dismisses worries and assures that everything is simply wonderful and the food is incredibly delicious. She says that she herself will escort him to the guest house whenever he wants to rest. Admitting his exhaustion, he decides that it is time to end the day and asks if she will lead him. Walking beside her, he suddenly feels a strange discomfort. He covers his face while the thought spins in his head. When you know the history of her family, every contact with them suddenly becomes difficult. She throws him a look surprised, because she noticed a sharp change in his behavior. The path leads to a modest wooden hut under the quiet night sky, a refuge where the weary traveler can finally rest. Saikyou lies back and stares at the ceiling, while turning over in his mind the absurdity of his situation. Just 2 nights ago, he was at a familiar campsite, but one night's sleep end, he found himself in this strange world of monsters and elves. He is unsettled that everyone here understands Japanese, and even his fluffy companion Fuda is considered a monster. Saikyou lies back and stares at the ceiling, while turning over in his mind the absurdity of his situation. Just 2 nights ago, he was at a familiar campsite, but one night's sleep end, he found himself in this strange world of monsters. All still remains a mystery to him. Here understands Japanese, and even his fluffy companion Fuda is considered a monster. He takes out his smartphone and scrolls to the photo taken on the day the car was delivered. The look at himself standing next to the dealer, in front of the van, feels as if it was in another life, a sharp contrast to his current reality. While he continued to stare at the image, the trembling candlelight by the bed cut off the shadows. Somewhere in his chest, a strange, persistent feeling of anxiety began to settle. There was something in the photo that just wouldn't come together in his mind, but he couldn't understand what exactly. The burden of events finally weighs down, the eyelids fill with heaviness. Contradictions and questions merge into a mush because fatigue takes over. Outside, the village sinks into a deep, quiet sleep under the starry sky. Deciding that there is no point in thinking further at night, he finally surrenders to sleep. The next morning, he goes out into the fresh air and stretches his numb limbs until the sun begins to rise. In the little white owl, he remains curled up on the bed like a ball of pure fluff in the rays of the morning light. He approaches the camper van. It stands next to the wooden house, ready and waiting. The new day brings a sense of renewed purpose, though the mysteries of this world still do not let go. He starts the morning by checking the camper's status screen and is pleased to see the water and fuel tanks are fully replenished. This confirms his theory that the vehicle restores resources overnight, but when he looks at the odometer, he frowns. Having traveled only 70 kilometers, he realizes he is still far from the 1,000-kilometer mark needed for the next level. His eyes widen with surprise as he notices the change on the display. His service points have grown to 2. This discovery puts him at a dead end. He did not expect any increase without raising the overall level of the vehicle. Sitting in the cramped space, he mumbles a wish for the instructions to explain these cryptic mechanics. He wonders where the new points came from and thinks whether he earned them by defeating monsters yesterday, but still doubts it. Gina was the fighter. Suddenly, he is cut off by a noise outside and he shifts his gaze to the window. He sees Gina, Martel, and the village guards gathered together and bustling about. Their voices rise into the morning air as they discuss something extremely important. He goes out to investigate, His gaze immediately falls on a pile of magical stones scattered on the ground near a large wooden box. The place momentarily throws him off track as he tries to understand where these valuable items came from. He joins the crowd of peasants, shielding his eyes from the morning sun and looking around. The air is thick with a mixture of excitement and confusion. Everyone is trying to understand what happened in the morning. His attention is distracted by the crowd. People part, letting an elderly woman named Yuru through. She approaches with a stone face. As soon as she appears, he immediately greets her and speaks urgently, asking, "Tell me what he needs to know about the monsters that were reported to have been slain earlier that same morning." She stands before Martel and Gina. Her appearance causes the silence to freeze as she throws a shocking revelation on the table. Martel's face pales with disbelief, and she asks if the news about the involvement of a young man could really be true, but the elder woman remains stern, offering no relief. She has already brought grim news, and it is the elder who pronounces the final verdict. The arena is irreversibly doomed, and there are no more options. This news hits him like a physical slap. His consciousness instantly clears, and his thoughts rush back to the young girl he saw just recently. According to the elders, a heavy shadow lies, and a gloomy silence creeps over the gathered peasants. He watches as the elder calls the disease dirt and illness, a name that seems to hold the dark history of the village, dating back to when this word was associated with Martel's own use. Turning his gaze to Gina, he sees the stoic warrior's composure crack. Her eyes reflect deep, personal pain as the full weight of what is happening finally reaches her. The explanation continues, outlining the cruel course of the disease. First a treacherous period with no symptoms, then a sudden, wildly violent attack, red rashes and high fever that take victims in just 3 days. Martel, stunned by the news, staggers and falls. Her strength leaves her as others rush to her. While he desperately insists that medicine might be in a distant town, the elder quickly crushes this hope. 3 days to Odorio is too long for the time the arena has left. He freezes in place, and the desperate voices of the peasants fade into a dull hum as he runs through the incredible timeline and the impending tragedy. He breaks the suffocating silence. He steps forward and calls Gina, his voice steady, though there is utter despair around, and this immediately gives a sense of a sudden break in his resolve. He caught her attention. She shuddered with her gaze, sharply turned to him, and something flashed on her face between hope and confusion at his sudden intervention. He is surrounded by an indifferent crowd of sad peasants and the burden of their shared despair. He lowers his gaze. His thoughts are already racing with possible options, while others stand frozen in grief. He forces himself to focus, deliberately sorting the facts. Dirt of disease, a deadly, world-bound illness he has never heard of, and young Arena has already fallen victim to its rapid and fatal course. Mathematics is cruel. 3 days by horse to the city and back makes 6. This is far beyond the 2 days the arena gave her before the disease takes her. Looking back at his companion and the small white owl, he realizes, since arriving in this world, he has traveled only about 70 kilometers, a tiny fraction of the distance needed to reach the medicine. He estimates about 240 kilometers to the town, so the entire trip is almost 500, impossible for a horse in the allotted time, but perhaps not for something else. His thoughts switch to modern transport, a full tank and a range of 500 kilometers, and he calculates, even on rough, broken off-road paths, albeit slowly, he can make it within 16-24 hours. Despite the promising numbers, he remains cautious, worried about fuel economy on these primitive roads and the very real possibility of encountering terrain that motorized transport simply cannot overcome. He weighs the grim possibilities and admits, due to the high center of gravity of the camper, it can easily tip over on uneven terrain. One mistake is enough and the vehicle will plunge off a cliff, ending everything. Outside the environment, the threat of monsters like Deke looms increasingly ominous. He fears a deadly encounter will leave him only with regret in his final moments. Thank you. He feels the weight of the decision pressing on him. He furrows his brow, staring intently into the unknown path ahead. He finds a sharper awareness that cuts through fear. If he sits idle and lets the arena die, the pangs of conscience will be far more unbearable than any physical danger. Suddenly stepping forward, he declared with sudden resolve to the gathered group that he himself would go. His outburst is being tracked by Gina, and the village elders' shock and disbelief freeze on their faces at his sudden proposal. He quickly sketches out his proposal, explaining, if someone who knows the route and the specific medicine accompanies him, he will transport them to the city and back in record time. Yet even remains deeply skeptical and asks how this is even possible if even the fastest horses cannot make the journey. In response, behind him rises the massive metal frame of his camper, a strange and powerful presence in the village clearing. Pressing his palm against the body, He declares with unwavering confidence that with this machine, the impossible journey can be completed. The preparation begins in earnest. Fingers slide into leather gloves, and straps tighten with a series of sharp clicks as the gear is securely fastened for the journey ahead. She steps forward a determined look and offers herself as a guard for the expedition. Gina insists she can handle any monsters that might appear alone. This statement brings relief to Shijido and Martel. They both understand. An elf capable of wielding magic is an invaluable asset on the dangerous road to the city. He decides to join as well, noting that his familiarity with the town of Odorio and connections with local traders will be crucial. The elder explains that Grand Mayoru will stay behind to do everything possible to keep Irina's condition stable while they are on the road. The guard Eben voices the harsh truth of their situation. The medicine is too expensive. Even if they gather all the village's meager savings, it will hardly be enough. The only hope is to sell all the remaining meat and hides to pay off the terrible Deke monster that Gina defeated the day before. While the meat is being salted for transport, they discuss the logistics of the plan. A heavy uncertainty hangs in the air. They wonder if the profit from the Deke will cover the expenses and if they can even make the round trip and return with the medicine in just 2 days. He proposes a radical alternative, to take Irina with them so she can receive the medicine as soon as they acquire it. But Eben hesitates, knowing that Shijido is not yet accustomed to long journeys, and a whole day in the carriage exhausts even a healthy adult, let alone a sick child. The man looks intently at the amazing mechanical beast Shijido brought into their world and weighs the risks. If Irina is too weak, the journey itself could kill her before they reach the city. Now everything depends only on how fast this monster can move. She rushes up with a basket of bread and cheese, carrying the long-awaited provisions for the road. Shijido utters words of thanks as the group prepares to depart. They gather and stick together. If they do not leave right now, the pause could cost Irina her life. He looks around the village square, trying to understand where Gina went. The elder says she went to visit Irina one last time before leaving, so he has to wait by the supplies. In the quiet cottage, she stands over the bed of a young girl. Irina's face is swollen from fever, and sweat streams down her skin. Her breathing is shallow. The fever is already taking its toll. The elf's expression is heavy. It holds both compassion and determination as she looks at the exhausted child. Leaning closer, she whispers a calm, solemn promise to the sleeping child, vowing to return with the medicine that will save her life, no matter the cost. A few moments later, the silence of the morning is broken by a deep, mechanical roar of the engine coming to life, a sign that their mission has started. The giant white transport bursts forward, cutting through a dusty trail, just breaking free from the safety of the village and beginning a deadly, dangerous journey into the unknown. It roars fiercely. The metal frame groans as the wheels break over the uneven, unpaved ground of the wild terrain, testing the limits of the machine. Gripping the steering wheel, he sees. Further from civilization, the road deteriorates increasingly faster. Nearby, an elf asks if the road will continue to narrow, and he confirms her fears, noting that the journey is already proving harder than they had expected. Behind them, the old man suddenly felt very ill, not from fear of the strange machine, but from a debilitating attack of seasickness. He slumps in his seat, his face pales, and his eyes roll back in surprise of the driver, who did not expect the old man to feel so bad from the ride. He hunched over, his face pale, trying hard to pull himself together after the nauseating ride. Gina asks if he is okay, hinting that some fresh air would do him good, while Shijido watches him anxiously from the driver's seat. Even with the camper's capabilities, the rough road might be too much for the old man. Glancing at the horizon, they see an even more treacherous terrain ahead. Jagged stone outcrops stretch into the sky like broken teeth. The wild, empty spaces almost erase the white transport from sight, emphasizing the complete loneliness of their journey. Despite his discomfort, the elder points the way forward and explains. Ahead lies a wider road. Shijido nods in acceptance of the advice and understands that as soon as they step out of the vehicle, the ground becomes much more stable and comfortable. Soon the journey continues. The camper shakes and groans again as it struggles through the uneven ground. Inside, metal constantly rattles, grinding laboriously against the rocky path, a constant reminder of the harsh conditions they have to endure. Suddenly, a small creature with long ears rushes across the road like a whirlwind, barely missing the heavy tires. Its movement is a brief flash of life in a barren wasteland. The bodywork crumbles as soon as the wheel flies into a deep rut. The frame is pierced by a fierce jolt. Shijido's eyes widen with anxiety. He grips the steering wheel tightly and feels the vehicle losing steady stability. The giant beast sways unsteadily to the side, about to topple over. Inside, the cabin blurs into continuous motion. Gina and the little owl lose their balance. Their faces are sharply cut by sudden horror as the world outside the window jerks at a disgusting angle. He desperately tries to stabilize them. Gina shouts to Shijido to activate the protective membrane on the dome. He looks back at her, his face full of complete incomprehension as he tries to grasp her command amid the chaos. He grabs the steering wheel as the giant machine wildly leans to one side, threatening to overturn at any moment. Nearby, the elven warrior shouts in fear, her eyes widening with sudden terror at the close disaster. In the rear, the old man is thrown by the force of the impact. His voice cuts through the chorus of panic as the world tilts at an impossible angle. With a bone-breaking roar, the heavy machine crashes back onto the rocky ground, and its weight finally settles as the suspension creaks under the load. As the dust settles, the warrior bows her head in shame and apologizes incessantly for failing her duty to track the monsters that caused her to stumble. He immediately reassures her. After all, the small creature is almost invisible under the massive frame structure of the vehicle, and he thanks fate that they did not overturn. Despite the calm words, he is still deeply confused, realizing that even at a slow 20 km per hour, one mistake in driving can result in a deadly rollover on this treacherous terrain. Searching for a way out, he shifts his gaze to the trembling control panel interface and notices he currently has 2 points available for system upgrades. He runs through the list of available functions from automatic repair to basic conveniences, looking for something that guarantees their safety. His gaze lingers on the auto repair option, but the requirements to earn more points remain a mystery. He knows he must first ensure the immediate survival of everyone on board, especially the young Arena. With a firm hand, he selects the center of gravity stability function, hoping it will be enough to keep them grounded. Immediately, a confirmation flashes on the screen for a moment. The new system is active. Now the vehicle will automatically balance itself in real time as a critical defense against the deadly threat of overturning. He firmly presses the accelerator pedal and the engine inside the cabin responds with a powerful, rhythmic throb. The sudden surge of power confuses his companions. Their eyes widen as the car prepares to burst forward. With stabilization on, the heavy white motorhome tears through uneven ground. The wheels madly churn mud, while the course remains steady and unbreakable. Noticing the changes, the elf warrior notes that the road has become amazingly smooth. He nods in agreement and confidently thinks that this new stability will allow him to travel more and spend less time. Despite the progress, she remains attentive, noticing with what frantic concentration he worked, adjusting the internal systems of the vehicle. She voices her concern, asking if he is taking on too much both for himself and the machine. He gives a reassuring smile and explains that he is not pushing beyond his limits. He insists both he and the transport are simply doing everything to save the young girl, Irina, reflecting the same dedication she has already shown. The journey continues relentlessly. Only the crew transport, a white flash in the dust, paves the way through the endless wild, rocky expanse under the open sky. From behind, the village elder approaches closer and squeezes into the conversation as they overcome an especially rocky section of the path. The elders suggest maintaining this pace for some more time. He replies that they have already been on the road for 10 hours and are currently on schedule for the best arrival time. She adds a warning. There is always a threat near the monsters, so the priority is to reach the safe city before nightfall. She watches him closely, noticing how the hard journey is etched on his tired face. She expresses deep concern, realizing that she should have noticed his fatigue earlier. Since morning they have been traveling these unfamiliar, broken roads. It has already clearly drained all his mental energy, and she insists they need to stop immediately. Even the elder agrees. They say everyone needs to rest and eat, but the driver does not relent. He insists that without him the vehicle will not move, and given the uncertainty of what lies ahead, they cannot afford to lose even a moment. He expresses deep gratitude for everything the young man has done, acknowledging that it was an age-old problem of the village and had nothing to do with him personally. He continues to insist to the exhausted traveler that even if everything goes wrong, no one in the village will think to blame him for how things turned out. The young man rejects the very idea of defeat. He simply could not live with himself if anything happened to Irina, her family, or the rest of the village. The thought of their suffering is a burden he is not ready to bear. Looking at the cart that brought him here, he remembers how warmly the locals treated him. He is convinced the true purpose of this machine is to bring joy to people, so he must keep pushing forward. He tells them that he wants everyone to be able to smile again. The elder finally gives in, promises to do everything he can, and warns not to exhaust himself too much, because the medicine will be meaningless if something happens to the one carrying it. He grips the steering wheel tightly, his face frozen with determination despite the fatigue. Behind, Gina swears to support him and promises, if he reaches the limit, she will carry both him and the elder to the very end. He only nods, looks at the road, agrees that they must avoid such a terrible outcome. The heavy machine roars, rushing through the endless desert and kicking up dust as it tears forward into the unknown. When the sun hides behind the horizon, the sky turns into a canvas of deep purples and gray shades, a sign that a long, hard night is coming. Under the cover of night, the young driver unfolds a map, irritated that the navigation shows only places he has already visited. Nearby, the elf warrior watches. Thick clouds have swallowed the stars, so they have no celestial orientation left, and the headlights unsuccessfully pierce the oppressive darkness. He turns to the elder and asks if the map will help find the city, but the old man explains, maps are a rare tool for merchants and pilgrims. For most, the path is already etched in memory and recognized by familiar landmarks, but now they are hidden by the night. The weight of the road begins to press down. He squints as he realizes they have been on the road for 14 hours, much longer than even his most pessimistic forecasts. They cannot wait for dawn. The urgency of this mission does not allow delay. Suddenly, a small white owlet stirs. Its wings beat the air as it rises into flight in the cramped cabin. Both he and the warrior freeze in stunned silence as the creature prepares to move. The bird leaps from the machine, its feathers flare with a bright, guiding glow, and it soars into the darkness. It becomes a beacon and an abyss, leading the way through the roadless night. She let out a sharp, urgent scream, and her bioluminescent glow flared even brighter as she circled above the car. Gina suddenly widened her eyes and immediately turned to Saikyou. She asked for permission to climb onto the roof to better see the path ahead. Without waiting for an official answer, she flew up together with elven grace, landing firmly on the camper roof. Somewhere high above, the white owl continued to lead them through the darkening sky, as if cutting through the gloom. From the new vantage point, the horizon finally gave a glimmer of hope. Far away, the lights of a small town flickered tremulously, hidden among the hills, a beacon of civilization amid the vast wild land. She exclaimed joyfully, and her face lit up as soon as she confirmed. The town's lights were finally within sight. Urging the group forward, she caught their energy with renewed strength. Inside the cabin, Saikyou squinted into the darkness. He saw only shadows. The elder calmly explained, an elf's vision far surpasses that of a human, and the sensitivity they possess is even more incredible. It allows them to navigate where others go blind. Realizing this, Gina said from above that she and the owl would give directions and warn of any obstacles on their path, so Saikyou could fully concentrate on driving and breaking through the difficult terrain. Wheel after wheel, the car thudded over the uneven ground, and the headlights cut the night into pieces. Saikyou gripped the steering wheel tighter, gathering his strength again. They were only one last push away from reaching their destination. Finally, massive wooden city gates rose before them, guarded by the ages frozen in the walls. The tired travelers gathered together near the entrance. The long road through the night had come to an end. He looks exhausted but rejoices as the group finally reaches their destination. The elder of Libido Village does not hide his genuine surprise, how they managed to get to Adrio in one day, even though the journey lasted 15 exhausting hours. Gina, noticing his fatigue, asks if he is holding up. He assures that everything is fine but admits, as soon as they can hand over and exchange some remains for currency, he will immediately lie down to rest. At the town entrance, the group is stopped by a guard for inspection. Libido steps forward and shows an official pass issued by the village authorities to confirm their business. The guard explains the procedure. All weapons must be accounted for, and any commercial transactions will be taxed depending on what exactly they are selling. The professional composure of the guard suddenly disappears as his gaze falls on a small white creature sitting on the young man's shoulder. He gasps sharply, not believing his eyes. It is the legendary forest owl. They say it brings incredible luck to anyone lucky enough to see it. The guard exclaims that such a creature almost never appears near human settlements, and this makes the group even more amazed, as the owl causes awe around itself. As soon as they are allowed entry, the group walks through quiet streets to the trade guild. Libido goes ahead, ready the day before to turn a deep corpse into money they so desperately lack. As they walk, the young man reflects on how much the local celebrity has already become his feathered companion, while the deer simply lets out a soft, indifferent caw. Their movement is abruptly stopped by very heavy wooden doors. A narrow slit slowly slides open in them, and a pair of indifferent eyes appear. A voice from inside cuts dryly. The establishment's working hours ended long ago. Despite the urgency of the mission, the clerk demands they return the next day. He doesn't care what happens to them. Despair grows as he pleads with the unseen clerk, emphasizing that human lives are at stake. His requests remain in vain outside. Cold indifference sits, unconcerned that their demand could mean life or death. Beyond him, comrades watch the scene and grow increasingly anxious, realizing that the bureaucracy of this town might become their greatest obstacle. Realizing that standard requests won't help, he turns his gaze to the elven warrior standing nearby. Quietly, with confident determination, he asks if she will agree to help him with a specific matter. The village elder stands before the closed shop doors, and the night silence falls on him like a heavy burden as he waits for an answer. He leans toward the small service window. His voice breaks as he begs to open the shop, insisting they cannot wait until dawn. From inside, the seller replies with slight annoyance, hinting that such matters should have been handled during the day. Their conversation is abruptly interrupted by a blinding light bursting behind the elder, casting long, sharp shadows on the wooden walls and leaving both men with wide-open eyes full of shock. From the heart of the light, a figure descends with ethereal grace, her silhouette outlined by flickering radiance, and a small white owl perched on her head. She lands and immediately strikes a dramatic theatrical pose. Her voice thunders authoritatively as she proclaims herself the chosen elf and divine messenger of the great forest owl. Continuing her dramatic speech, she says she has traveled an incredible distance to save the people of this town and commands the merchant to purchase the outfit she brought to support their cause. Enchanted by the spectacle, the elder turns back to the window and shouts for the doors to be opened immediately, while Saikyou watches the elf's performance, mixing excitement with slight discomfort. The heavy doors finally creak and open. When the merchant steps out to find where the goods are, the elf gestures toward a large metal carriage. It begins to hum and flare, covered with strange swirling energy. He freezes in amazement as a huge pile of supplies materializes before him with a deafening crash of bones, crates, barrels, and sacks. The volume of this trophy is staggering, far more than he expected from a single delivery. He instantly switches to emergency mode, sharply calls the live staff to his residence, let them wake up, and immediately start evaluating the goods. Gina, still holding her roll, a white owlet sits on her shoulder, sincerely thanks him, and Saikyou, with a humble, apologetic intonation, apologizes for the sudden burden. Due to the urgent order, the warehouse comes alive. Workers begin exhausting work weighing and sorting the catch. They drag heavy carcasses in barrels, and the air fills with industrial sounds as they process the meat and materials brought from the forest. While the work continues, the dealer explains to the elder, even if his entire team works at full capacity, completing the evaluation will take at least 2 hours. The elder acknowledges the delay, understanding the scale of the task they have been given. While they discuss logistics, the elder's attention suddenly shifts to Saikyou. He turns pale and staggers on his feet. The elder asks if an advance can be given for medicine payment, noticing the young man is getting worse. Suddenly, the tension becomes unbearable and he falls face forward onto the hard ground. Gina and the elder cry out convulsively in fright, rush to him while he lies motionless. The sharpness of the fall turns them into panic. She immediately drops to her knees, holds his head in her palms, and repeatedly asks if he hears her, if he feels nauseous. Her voice nearly breaks with anxiety as she calls someone to bring water. Her usual composure shatters after his sudden fall. Despite her desperate pleas, he does not respond, eyes closed, and he sinks into a deep, quiet unconsciousness. Only his shallow, even breathing is heard. The group is gripped by tense silence as they wait for any sign of recovery. He remains firm in the elf's hands, eyes closed, and sleep heavy and deep. The village elder approaches them. His face is creased with concern as he sees the young man's condition. After a brief examination, the elder decides it is only exhaustion, a natural consequence of all the day's trials. While the elder thoughtfully strokes his beard, the warrior woman looks down at the unconscious companion. Her brows are furrowed in worry and protective instinct. Breaking the silence, the elder orders her to take the sleeping man to the resting place near the city entrance. She explains she will go to the pharmacy herself, carrying detailed notes that Granny Yoru gave about the needed medicines and the young girl's symptoms. At first she hesitates, unwilling to leave him, but finally nods in understanding. With amazing ease, she slings the man over her shoulder. Her strength does not match her delicate appearance. She declares she is going to settle him, and the elder only marvels at her physical power as they depart. Night falls on the quiet settlement. The silhouettes of buildings darken against the endless starry sky, sprinkled with stardust. Under the same canopy, his eyelids slowly twitch and open from his sight. The world blurs with dark silhouettes and distant light until consciousness returns. When his vision clears, her face appears above him. The look of tense anxiety disappears, and a soft, relieved smile blooms on her lips. She exhales with relief, seeing that he has finally returned to them. He finds himself comfortably lying on a wooden cart, under a thick blanket. He raises his gaze to his companion and weakly asks where they are now, still confused after that sudden fall. He opens his eyes and freezes. Before him is an impressive scene, and he himself lies calmly on Gina's lap. The realization hits him so tangibly, like a physical blow. His face twists in pure shock as he looks down at her. Jumping up with a frightened impulse, he grabs his head. Thoughts race to piece together fragments of memories about their arrival and the strange events in the shop. A sharp movement knocks the breath out of him, and he is completely lost. When the first shock subsides, he awkwardly apologizes, thanks her for her patience, and for letting him use her lap as a pillow. She only nods, confirming he really slept quite a long time. The weight of what happened overwhelms him, and he groans, hiding his face in his hands as a wave of sharp shame washes over him. He compares this feeling to being dragged home by a subordinate after a night of excess, while she just giggles and nudges him to throw it out of his head. Reaching for his device, he freezes in shock. While he was unconscious, 3 full hours have already passed. Nearby, a small white owl watches him intently and motionlessly with wide, unblinking eyes as the reality of lost time dawns on him. His concern immediately shifts to the village elder, and he asks why that old man was even allowed to go to the pharmacy alone at such an hour. He suggests following after him, but she awkwardly admits that before the elder left, she never asked exactly where that shop is located. She gently insists that he remain seated and continue recovering until the elder returns, emphasizing that there is no point in rushing now. He lowers his gaze, and guilt darkens his face for losing strength just when his help was needed most. Watching her, he senses hidden tension in her posture and understands. She worries about Irina's condition just as much as he does. A heavy premonition overwhelms him, and that feeling becomes even more unbearable. He is met with her firm persistence when she orders him not to dismiss his own contribution. She emphasizes, without him, no help for their companion would have come together. They wouldn't have been able to reach this town at all, let alone find a way to help. In response, he remains modest. He says it is too early for gratitude because the young Irina has not even received the medicine yet, but she is moved to tears and sincerely thanks him for everything he has already done for them. Her face dims to a quiet, sad reflection as she recalls a painful memory from the past. She says, when her own mother fell ill with an adult disease, she was completely powerless, just sitting and watching in tears as her mother's life faded. Listening intently, she explains, when she heard that Irina had caught the same disease, that indescribable feeling of hopelessness returned. She was afraid that once again she would be unable to do anything to change the tragic ending. But now everything is different. Sitting with her back to him, she admits, if they borrow his strength, they will indeed reach this town for the medicine need. Finally, she has a way to really help the girl. This realization brought her deep relief and hope, something she had not felt for a very long time. She turns to him with a radiant, tearful smile and says how much his presence has saved her heart. He only freezes and silently looks back. He is struck by the depth of her gratitude and the icy frankness of her voice. He catches her passionate words of gratitude a little confusedly, stands up, and with a resolute exclamation shakes off the drowsiness still clinging to his body, spreads his arms ready for the tasks ahead, and she looks at him softly, with grateful warmth. He approaches the village elder with a sense of urgency, apologizes abruptly for the delay, and immediately asks how the medicines, which they so desperately lack, are doing. The elder, noticeably relieved that he has finally come to his senses, greets him warmly. Carefully watching him, the elder raises a small, precious glass and explains that thanks to the influence of Granny Yoru, they managed to get the medicine without any complications. Gina watches silently, her face softening as if the burden of their mission is easing a little. He further describes the old woman's reputation, emphasizing that in the medical community of this city she is a legendary figure, and adds, it was enough to just show her letter of recommendation for the local pharmacists to agree to give medicine even on a dead night. The young man was stunned. The woman he considered an ordinary mystic has such professional authority. Finally receiving the medicine, the group returns to their huge iron carriage. It stands as a beacon of light against the backdrop of the desolate, windswept, frozen, nice landscape. Settling into the driver's seat, he prepares for the long road back, and outside there is complete darkness, without any recognizable landmarks. Gino expresses concern that they won't find their way in this emptiness, but he does not look away, focused, confident that they will break through this darkness. When he turns on the controls, a glowing map lights up on the panel. It flickers and comes alive, and its intricate lines trace a route through the surrounding forests and hills as the navigation system starts. While they prepare to set off, the elder shudders upon hearing the little white owl speak in a human voice. The driver quickly explains. He clarifies, this creature has a unique ability to remember any place it has ever visited, so it unfailingly guides them back on the road. Despite his concern that the driver hasn't rested, the young man insists and pushes forward, entrusting his companions to watch out to see if monsters lurk somewhere in the darkness. At the end, he nods to signal and grips the steering wheel, ready to seize the night to deliver the medicine. He reassures his companions, laughing and brushing off exhaustion with a mention of his past as a corporate slave. The elder still cannot grasp the strange term, and Gino looks at him with a mix of curiosity and worry, wondering how he still stays so lively after such a long journey. His gaze does not leave the road ahead, and the clock on the panel counts the time past 2 a.m. Having sat behind the wheel for 18 hours straight, he calculates their route and knows, as long as they avoid any adventures, they will arrive exactly on time. The heavy vehicle rumbles dully through the darkness, and its headlights carve a lonely path in the silence of the wild desert. Slowly, the oppressive blackness of the night begins to seep through the soft gray and pink hues of dawn, revealing a torn, alien landscape of towering rock formations. When the first light of morning fills the cabin, Gina notices dawn has finally come. Appropriate visibility urges him to increase speed, and she silently hopes their current acceleration will be enough to reach the destination in time. But it is clear how the road has worn them out on the small guide. He lies sprawled like a fable on the panel. His strength has completely vanished. They look at the little owl, frightened by his sudden silence and complete stillness. Their concern for their friend is abruptly interrupted by sudden movement outside. He tenses, eyes wide open, and aloud asks if a monster has appeared to block their path through the past. Ahead, 2 huge dark figures loom over the morning sky, jagged like saw teeth. He looks through the glass, and a hardness appears in his gaze as soon as a real obstacle becomes apparent before them. He grips the steering wheel, squinting at the horizon where a thick dusty cloud begins to rise. He asks Gina what she can see from her place, sensing something is wrong in that distance. A dust cloud coils over the desert landscape, and torn cliffs, like teeth, jut out on either side of the sky. She leans forward, and her eyes widen as soon as she recognizes the source of the commotion. A huge herd of monsters is rushing straight at them. She urgently warns, a crush is already flying towards them. The ground trembles under the weight of Black Bull's monsters. With many eyes and reddish, jagged horns, they madly charge forward, relentless and unstoppable. Gina calls them a deadly threat when they gather in such numbers and says, encountering them on the road means death. In response, Shidru decides to steer the vehicle onto higher ground so the herd's charge passes safely by. Suddenly, a small white owl lets out a piercing cry, wildly flapping its wings, warning the pair of the danger that is about to catch up with them. He quickly thanks the creature for the warning, adjusts the course, and at the same time acknowledges the owl's alertness and its role in keeping them safe. But as she looks at the commotion, a chilling realization overwhelms her. The monsters are not attacking, they are fleeing in panic from something even more formidable hiding behind. She watches as a giant column of dust bursts from the valley, and the very earth screams under the weight of the approaching wave. In front of the stormy cloud, the herd of black bulls gallops madly in hopeless panic. Their predatory instincts vanish, giving way to pure, unadulterated fear. Looking back at all this chaos, she warns others. Something huge is trailing the herd. Its scale is one they have never seen before. A cold thought overwhelms her. Even if they climb higher, escaping a threat of such magnitude is impossible. From their precarious position above, the camper van looks almost like a toy against the backdrop of the impending devastation. Inside the vehicle, he grips the steering wheel with trembling hands, and on his face is a frozen mixture of fear and iron determination. He reminds himself how far they have come, and that it depends on them whether everyone stays alive, swearing they will get the medicine and return alive no matter what monster breathes down their neck. The valley rocks, a lonely cart rushes through a narrow passage, and behind it flies, rising, a wall of dust and the echoes of a huge threat thunder. In the cabin, he grips his seat, eyes wide with fear, while the ground behind him explodes with a series of brutal jolts ready to devour the road. From the sharp impact, he freezes in shock and looks through himself in disbelief, as a giant, multi-rooted creature emerges from the debris and tears forward with a deafening roar, and he wonders aloud if the monster that Gina supposedly defeated somehow came back from the dead. The elder quickly corrects him and explains that this is a completely different specimen. Mutivoras are usually solitary and territorial creatures, so this repeated appearance is extremely unusual. While the vehicle flies in a desperate escape, he snatches something through the rear window and freezes, while a frantic chase for a solution runs through his mind as a small owl silently watches. He freezes in shock as she passes at the tail of the bus. Her hand calmly rests on the blade. She warns that the beast's mad acceleration will soon engulf them and insists on staying behind to slow the pursuit. He protests immediately, his voice trembling with anxiety, as he imagines how she will have to carry this alone given the odds, and the elder only recalls a possible detour that will force them to turn back. Despite his pleas, she stands firm against the overwhelming wave of bull monsters, and the giant draws her sword and calls him to witness her victory as she swears she cannot be defeated. She urges him on. Her voice cuts through the air with urgency as she warns, the black bulls are already approaching. Inside, he grips the steering wheel, sweat streams down his forehead, and the device clicks, recording their current coordinates to return here later. He looks back through the rear window. On his face is a carved, desperate promise that he will come back for her. As the engine roars, the distance between them expands, and she remains a solitary figure against the backdrop of a vast, dangerous landscape. She gives a barely noticeable, calm smile, accepting the burden of her choice. Beneath her, the earth trembles as the heavy vehicle accelerates, raising dust and rushing away from the inevitable slaughter. She stands steadfast, and the wind cuts, tossing her hair into a golden wild blizzard around her determined gaze. A gigantic, clumsy form of Mutavora looms over her. It is Ma-Gape, and small black bulls with many eyes gather in a circle. Nothing stops her. She draws her blade on spark of defiance against the encroaching shadow. Meanwhile, the bus hits a rough mountain trail and flies down, the suspension creaking and groaning from the mad speed of escape. He stared motionless at the road ahead. The knuckles on his fingers turned white on the handlebars, was struggling with guilt for leaving the commander behind. He calls an apology to the elder for the bumpy road, but his voice is gripped by knowledge. Speed is their only hope. The old man is thrown backward by the wild jolts, while the little white owl clings on, gasping for breath, and sees everything during their frantic escape. He grips the steering wheel tightly, and thoughts race. How Gina stands alone against the monsters. Every passing second stretches into eternity and knows she risks everything to buy them time. A heavy machine roars across the deserted plains, scattering a giant cloud of dust, while at a mad speed it cuts the landscape like no horse can catch up. When the sun sets beyond the horizon, the bright colors of twilight spread into the deep, starless darkness of night. Thus are marked the hours spent in relentless, desperate flight. In the quiet village, torches flicker in the darkness, and sentries, filled with fatigue, stand guard from their wooden towers. They do not even suspect the mechanical creature that is already approaching. These two piercing beams of light cut through the valley shadows, announcing the traveler's return long before the engine sound reaches the village gates. The guards peer into the distance, trying to understand whether those glowing orbs are the eyes of some strange servant serving Lord Saikyou. Distrust flares up with wild joy. They understand. The impossible has happened. The group really returned from the distant land of Odorio overnight. He gets out of the car next to the elder woman, who immediately calls Granny Euro. The villagers gather, saying that they care for Irina at home, but her condition was so terrible that they feared she would not survive the night. Fortunately, the medicine arrived in time. She watches intently as Grandma Euro works at a practical speed. Her hands are steady as she grinds rare herbs into a fine powder. The rhythmic scraping of the mortar and pestle is the only sound in the tense room until she carefully pours the mixture into a glass. When the medicine was ready, she and the elder carefully lifted the sick girl, persuading her to swallow the bitter liquid. Irina's face covered in dark feverish spots drank weakly, and it seemed that her life force was fading with every shallow breath. Behind the small house, the silence of the night is broken only by the muffled whispers of the inhabitants gathered in the darkness. They peer through the windows and crowd near the doors, faces burned with fear and desperate hope for the child inside. Turning back to the bed, the girl's breathing is still heavy. Her skin is covered with cold sweat as the illness ravages her fragile body. But almost imperceptibly, her chest stops twitching in a panic rhythm and begins to breathe more evenly, and the tension of pain on her face gradually eases. Seeing the changes in her condition, the elder leans forward. His roughened hand reaches out to check the temperature. He watches her intently, holding his breath, waiting for a sign that the treatment has worked. He is silent for a long time, not taking his eyes off hers, and gently lifts her eyelid to see the clarity. Behind him, a young man stands as if rooted to the spot, eyes wide open, and in his gaze a silent plea for good news. Finally, the elder returns to the door and declares that the medicine worked, his voice drawn out with heavy, truly relieved joy. His words immediately stir the crowd outside. Laughter and cries of joy echo through the village. Amid applause of celebration, the young man releases a long, trembling breath as if finally the unbearable burden of responsibility has fallen from his shoulders. Nearby, the old woman who prepared the medicine can no longer hold back. She covers her face and, through tears of relief streaming down her cheeks, only trembles with joy. He stands with a sudden, sharp, determined expression, and his gaze is fixed on a target that only he sees. Without uttering a word, he dashed past the rookie guards, his boots kicking up dust as he raced to his car. Even in Belk Watch'em Go, their surprise only grows. They realize that Gina is disappearing too. She was supposed to be by the bed, but she is nowhere to be found. The noise draws the elder outside. There the guards quickly report strange disappearances, while others try to maintain the silence needed to restore the arena. The elder's face darkens with a heavy secret, and he ignores the bustling whispers of the villagers, who mistakenly believe, because of his gloomy silence, that he has suddenly fallen ill. He watches as the dusty path stretches behind the departing bus, silently entrusting the safety of the missing warrior to the man who has just fled. Far from the village, a heavy rain washes off the carcass of the fallen beast, and the silence of the forest is broken only by the rhythmic downpour. In the midst of the storm, Saikyou stands by his car, holding the powerless, rain-soaked Gina close to his chest. He successfully returned her to the safety of the bus, which stands still amid the relentless rain flooding the forest. Inside the cabin, her eyelids twitch, her eyes open, and the fog of unconsciousness dissipates, revealing dirt and bruises on her face. Noticing her movement, he leans over her with a gentle smile, showing how deeply relieved he is that she has finally regained consciousness. She suddenly sits up, gripped by panic, and calls his name in a trembling voice. The sharp movement makes her shudder. He quickly persuades her to remain still, explaining that although he managed to provide some basic first aid, her body is still covered with injuries from the fight. At first, he thinks of that little girl, then reassures her they are safe inside the camper. He even offers warm soup to chase away the cold from the storm. He confirms that the medicine has reached its destination, and that Arena is out of danger. This makes her break down in tears of sincere gratitude and relief. Noticing the huge shirt she now wears, she listens carefully. He shyly explains he had to take off her wet cloak and dry her. Then he offers her his own clothes to warm her, though he worries about their sin. She looks at him with a soft, tired smile and shows how deeply grateful she is that he came to find her. He nods gently and finally suggests heading back to Harem village, where everyone is eagerly awaiting their return. The decision is made. He grabs the steering wheel, and the heavy vehicle sets off along the uneven, wild terrain. The engine hums steadily as they drive away from the battlefield and head toward the horizon. When the bus approaches the village gates, a small crowd has already gathered nearby in anticipation. Elders of the village and a young girl stand beside Themal, staring intently at the road, holding their breath. She sits in the crowd, eyes wide open, full of a mixture of hope and distrust, as the familiar transport finally appears before her eyes. The feeling of the recent ordeal seems to hang in the air as she waits even for a memento to see her savior. The bus finally scrapes and stops, raising a small cloud of dust. He peeks out from the driver's seat, and on his face is the full weight of the moment as the doors begin to hiss and open. He carefully helps the wounded elf girl up as she rises from her place. Her body is still wrapped in thick bandages. Seeing this, the young girl tries to stand on her own, but the elders immediately stop her, warning that it is too soon. She is too weak to stand by herself. Ignoring protests and her own physical weakness, she, staggering, stubbornly steps forward, her legs trembling from overexertion. Driven solely by emotion, she falls to the ground in a desperate attempt to reach the one who risked everything for her. Seeing her determination strikes the viewers like a wedge in the heart. Their faces flash with surprise and anxiety. He silently watches as a bond is born between the two survivors, growing stronger than their physical pain, and they, touching what is most precious, return to the safety of the village. She reaches out her hand. Her small palm trembles as she tightly grips the wooden handrails to lean on. Next to her stands a warrior, tall, her silhouette cut against the bright sky, yet her posture reveals deep, hidden fatigue. Her boots press firmly into the mud, holding her in place as she prepares to endure the emotional weight of this moment. The two finally crashed into each other in desperate embrace. Tears streamed down their faces, and the tension of the entire ordeal subsided. Nearby, peasants watched, mixing relief with sorrow, seeing how the road had physically killed their defenders. Suddenly, the warrior woman's knees buckle, and she sinks to the ground, still tightly clutching the young girl. Saikyou cries out in panic, reaching forward, because she sees her strength has finally run out. Hesh gives a barely noticeable, exhausted smile. Her eyes tremulously close, and she quietly whispers that relief has come in a wave, so the body no longer has the strength to stay upright. Saikyou looks at others and notes the village elder has already warned him about their reckless actions. He demands first to take care of the wounds and orders the young girl to immediately return to her bed, but she stubbornly and playfully goes her own way in response. When the peasants begin to catch their exhausted breath, he stands next to the elder and quietly observes everything, focused and thoughtful. The danger has passed, but the path to recovery is just beginning. He stands before the village elder, who bows his head with deep gratitude. The old man acknowledges the incredible efforts and all the hardships he endured for their sake, saying that words cannot express his thanks. Summing up his modest explanation further, the elder admits with a heavy heart, the village has nothing valuable left to offer as a reward. They were forced to sell everything given the livestock to survive the recent trials. In response, the young man gives a gentle smile. A small white owl sits calmly on his shoulder. He says that for him and his companion, the joy of the peasant is the only payment they need. He looks out at the crowd and sees relief on the faces of those they are saving. Little girl Irina, the restored elf Gina, and others. For him, their safety and the return of smiles are more valuable than any material treasures. The elder lets out a quiet, grateful chuckle struck by how selflessly the young man acts, and he says that he truly has a relaxed heart, a rare trait that brings peace to those nearby. The term hits him unexpectedly, forcing him to stop and ponder the weight of this word. He reels in his mind how in his own memories such a phrase often became a spearhead, a hint against his generation, but here it is presented as the highest praise. Casting aside a brief moment of self-reflection, he catches a new thought. Turning to the elder, he makes a restrained request asking if they might have some spare old clothes he could use. Nearby, he waits patiently, holding his fluffy companion, ready to move on to the next task. He explains, during the journey his clothes got very worn out and he has no supplies, so he would be grateful for a replacement. The elder nodded, understanding, and assured that finding suitable clothes is an easy matter. Grateful, the young man says, there is one more thing he wants to find out about. Hesitating slightly, he asks a strange question. Have there ever been rumors that people suddenly appear as if from another world or vanish without a trace? This conversation makes the old man freeze. He opens his eyes wide as he comprehends the weight of these words. Feeling the heavy silence pressing down, the traveler quickly tries to shift the conversation and brush it off as if to say, it doesn't matter, it's nothing. But the elder stubbornly sticks to the topic. The elder leans forward, and his face becomes stern as he directly asks, is it true that the man before him is a visitor from another kingdom? Stunned by the precision of the question, he can only silently stare in response. A truthful thread hangs between them, heavy and relentless. The morning sun illuminates a sturdy wooden structure hidden at the forest edge. Outside silence, but it only conceals the weight of the conversation about to begin inside. In the middle among the shelves of ancient texts, the village elder sits composed at the table, calmly and kindly meeting the gaze of his guest's arrival. He notes that the new clothes fit perfectly, and the young man immediately expresses sincere gratitude for the items being delivered to his temporary residence. Standing straight in new clothes, the traveler does not waste a moment and immediately states that he wants to continue from the place where their conversation stopped yesterday. It seems elder freezes for a moment, and his face becomes stern as he asks a shocking question. Did his guest really come from another world? And as soon as the young man confirms it, the old man just breathes out in surprise, cannot believe that such a legend is true. Noticing the fatigue etched on the guest's face, the elders advise postponing further discussions until the next day and insistently urge him to finally rest after 2 sleepless nights. He desperately needs it. In the quiet office, a heavy silence fills the space. 2 men stand silently, and the weight of their shared revelation hangs in the air between them. Curious how his secret was revealed, the traveler asks for explanations, and the elder tells an ancient tale. When the flow of the earth's veins is disrupted, aliens from distant worlds often get lost and wander in this realm. He listens intently as the elder begins to talk about the earth vein, a fundamental source of magical energy that circulates throughout the world. This flow, explains the elder, is the life force for those who possess magic, and for monsters that roam the lands, and influencing even the very air they breathe. Like a river, it can become smooth or suddenly break loose and become turbulent. In extremely rare moments, this flow is so fiercely disrupted that it creates anomalies, distorting the very fabric of space into a twisted vortex. The young man's eyes widen sharply when the elder says that these distortions can flip a bridge over the chasm between different worlds, thus another world, or a cross, appears. Taking a moment to recover, the old man lets out a heavy sigh. The burden of what is happening is etched into the wrinkles around his mouth. He points out that the recent chaos, the sudden appearance of creatures like Deke and the huge mutavora on public roads, was caused by the earth vein flow being so severely thrown out of balance. Glancing at the silhouettes of the village guards, the elder admits, once he considered tales of other worlds to be mere stories, but seeing Shaidru's black hair and his eccentric clothing, they no longer think so. Shaidru nods, confirming that he really came from another dimension. He appeared here suddenly after falling asleep in his transport. He explains, in his world there were neither monsters nor magic, not even people like Gina. And even a small white owlet, he clarifies, is not considered a real monster there. Despite these huge differences, he is surprised that they can still understand each other's language. Continuing his explanation, he admits, as soon as he found himself in this realm, he somehow gained abilities that should not exist. The elder listens carefully, agreeing that such powers, which break common sense and even the senses themselves, are truly incredible. He reflects, it will become increasingly difficult to maintain the legend that he is just a monster. His gaze fades downward, a heavy silence falls between them, as he prepares to ask the question that has been weighing on his heart. Staring the old man straight in the eyes with desperate sincerity, he confesses a deep desire to return to his own world. He asks if there is any known way, or if there is someone who has the knowledge to help him find the way back. In response, the elder closes his eyes, and a soft, painful regret settles on his face. He says that the legends he spoke of are ancient, and their origins are shrouded in mystery. With a heavy heart, he apologizes, admitting that he does not know how to send him back, and even as despair is about to overwhelm him, someone clenches a fist, revealing an inner struggle with a situation that seems hopeless. Outside, the village remains a picture of pastoral peace. The inhabitants continue their daily chores, unaware of the gravity of the conversation taking place inside. Breaking this gloomy silence, the elder offers a lead and speaks of rumors. Researchers scattered across the world dedicate their lives to studying the connection between distortions in the Earth's veins and other worlds. These words make him shudder, and a spark of new hope flashes in his eyes. He listens attentively as the elder continues his instructions. The ancient man advises Shidru, it is worth visiting large cities or sacred pilgrimage sites where crowds gather there. He might finally come across the researchers he is looking for or find the necessary information. This advice plunges him into deep reflection and forces him to weigh the reality of a global journey. Even with the incredible capabilities of the camper, traveling a world teeming with monsters will be exhausting and deadly dangerous. And even then, the chance to find the way home remains a fleeting hope. While he is stuck in thought, Gina approaches to check if everything is all right. He immediately asks about her injuries, but she waves off his concern with a smile. She says she only feels slight pain and can walk without problems. Then she asks what has thrown him off balance. They settle by a wooden fence under the open sky. Nearby, as they talk, sits a small white owlet. He confesses, his thoughts have again turned to his homeland Japan, and he admits there is still much he wants to accomplish if he ever finds the way back. He further explains the original purpose of his efforts. He admits that he worked tirelessly to get the camper precisely for a peaceful, measured life on the road together with friends. He lowers his gaze. His voice carries a note of nostalgia and uncertainty about the path ahead. In response, her face lights up with a radiant, sincere smile. The idea of such a journey seems truly wonderful to her. Her enthusiasm cuts through his gloomy mood. They look at the rolling hills. She thoughtfully reviews her own experience. At first, the strange transport frightened her, but over time she learned to appreciate its conveniences. She agrees, traveling together, sheltered from bad weather and having a safe place to rest, sounds like a wonderful adventure. She leans toward him, energy and determination burn in her eyes again. She exclaims joyfully, they must do whatever it takes for him to return home, and she fully commits to his cause. Suddenly she wants with all her heart to go with him. Her voice is quiet but firm. He nervously snorts, admitting, yes, he wouldn't mind himself, but the way back to his world remains a frightening mystery. Her eyes flash with genuine admiration as she declares that she wants to see his homeland with her own eyes. Even the thought of such an impossible journey does not dampen her mood in the slightest. Her enthusiasm momentarily throws him off balance. His gaze softens as he considers her words. A gentle hand reaches out to him, a silent gesture of support despite his uncertainty. A new insight begins to form in his mind. If a way back to his world exists, then perhaps there is also a road to return here. The very thought of a bridge between these two lives fills him with a quiet hope that is just beginning to grow. Watching her play with a small, fluffy owlet, he allows himself to imagine a future where he can invite them both into his world. He knows such thoughts are overly optimistic, and coincidences do not work in his favor, yet he cannot help but wonder. Just the thought that he might share his home with new friends barely stirs a smile on his lips. He reflects that it would be wonderful to build a bridge between his past and this strange, new present. He turns back to her. He thanks her sincerely, and his determination strengthens again thanks to her unwavering support. He vows to do everything in his power to find the way home, starting with another conversation with the village elder. He soon finds himself at the elder's doorstep, crossing the threshold of a quiet room filled with books. The old man looks up from reading and greets him calmly, kindly. Shizuru listens attentively, while Shizuru firmly declares that he will set out on a journey to find the way back to his world. The young man admits his vulnerability. He says he is not yet accustomed to this strange land, and in just a few short days has already encountered so many life-threatening dangers. The concerns are met with a nod of understanding from the elder. He assures that Shizuru is a welcome guest and proposes a plan. Shizuru is to travel for a month to weigh all options, then return to the safety of the village. He looks into the distance at the horizon and thinks, although the journey is necessary, wandering unknown lands alone is too dangerous for someone like Shizuru. To avert this threat, he calls Gina and orders her to accompany Shizuru on the road as his bodyguard, a sharp order that surprises both the elf and the young man due to the speed of the decision. She immediately takes on the task with inexhaustible energy, even suggests setting off right at that moment. However, the elder doubts whether she has recovered from her previous wounds. Having overcome any lingering pain, the warrior rushed to prepare for departure the next morning, leaving Shigeru alone with her thoughts with her to worry about her incredible zeal and strength that made her tremble. When she disappears from sight, the elder watches her with difficulty. He has already told everything he knows about her past, yet the girl still tragically does not suspect her true nature. With a heavy heart he looked ahead, understanding that keeping a young woman named Gina within the narrow confines of this small village was a disgrace to her potential. The old man understood, even if she knew she was an elf, and therefore different from those around her, everyday life alone would not suffice. She needed to live through those vast differences in lifespan, values, and in the pure physical and magical superiority her kin had over others. He looked at her bright, hopeful smile as she looked toward Shizuru. It felt like somewhere deep down, she subconsciously longed to see what was hidden beyond the forest. Turning to the young man, the elder said how well Shizuru seems to understand Hirvan from the first meeting and, already, officially, asked him to allow her to go with him for her own growth. He accepted responsibility, staring without trembling, and dryly said only that he understands the weight of the request. Finally, the day of departure arrived, and the whole community gathered near the strange metal carriage to say goodbye under the clear, open sky. The peasants pressed baskets of food and supplies into his hands. Their faces shone with warmth and good wishes for the road ahead. While they were preparing to set off towards the large city of Ludi, a bustling hub recommended by the elder, he looked at the map. His gaze held determination and at the same time uncertainty. He was troubled by whether they would really find the way. He stands among the village men, and from excitement his face flushes as they playfully question him about his romantic life, whether he has a wife or if a lover is waiting somewhere. Thanks to his recent heroic deeds, he shared some meat, saved young Arena, and twice rushed to rescue Gina. His authority among the men reached new heights, and they do not hesitate to sing his praises. Suddenly he is hit by a realization like a physical blow. They mean that he must marry in the village, but the men are already at the limit of patience due to his obvious blindness to what Gina feels. The conversation continues. She approaches the group, interested in the topic of their quiet whispering, and the men immediately change the subject, noting that a moonlit journey usually causes great anxiety. In a moment, two of them bustle about, loading their supplies into the transport's bed. Their excitement practically glows, while a white owlet flutters nearby, impatient for the journey to finally begin. He turns to his companion and asks if she is finally ready to depart. She responds with a bright and determined nod. Despite her enthusiasm, a shadow of hesitation crosses her face, and she admits that the prospect of spending a whole month away from home is already beginning to feel lonely. In response, he takes out a strange device with a long handle and a glowing screen, explains that it is for a commemorative photo, and suggests they gather everyone together by the village gate one last time. He captures the moment. The digital screen shows the entire village gathered together in one flawless frame. He shows the device to his companions. He watches as their eyes widen in disbelief. Gina is sure he is some kind of wizard, and the men wonder how it is possible to create a portrait in an instant so they can see their own faces whenever they want. After farewells, the heavy engine of the machine comes to life with a rumble, vibrating and crackling against the dryer. When the van begins to drive away, Gina looks out the window, energetically waves her hand, and shouts the last goodbyes to the crowd of villagers who watch them leave. He looks at the horizon, and a quiet smile plays on his lips, while the amazing, beautiful landscape of this world with suspended peaks and dazzling sun rolls past. The journey officially started. The white Vanus moves alone and steadily through the endless, rocky terrain. Sitting behind the wheel, he decided it was time to enter their destination point into the navigator, recalling the place the villagers describe. But as soon as the map calculates the route, his face pales. He grabs his head and freezes in disbelief while Gina remains looking at him in confusion, trying to understand what could have struck him so instantly. The camper van stands quietly in the wild area until the digital display flickers and shows 2 holding points accumulated. A list of various maintenance and supply functions appears on the screens. It is clear what condition the vehicle is currently operating in. Inside the cabin, he examines the control panel. He notices that the speedometer already shows 708 kilometers. Then he studies a separate screen. The machine is still holding at level 1, and more than 600 kilometers remain until the next milestone. He tries to figure out under what exact conditions more points can be earned. His confusion only grows as he cross-checks the indicators. Despite the trip meter showing 700 kilometers traveled, they have advanced only halfway to the next level. He completely puzzles over the discrepancy and cannot understand why the system does not display their entire journey. Noticing his daze, the elf warrior moves closer and asks if the magical technique he used earlier to help the little owl grow was a specific spell. He confirms her suspicion, admitting that the process indeed has a mystical nature. He exhales, admitting that he still does not understand how to properly control these abilities, and that forced growth always turns into a continuous struggle. She responds with a soothing word. There is no need to rush the process. She smiles warmly and reminds him that the fluffy creature is a valuable companion who requires patient care. Her words hit right in the heart. He finally realizes that he had not truly seen the owl as a partner until now. Then he decides to activate the auto repair function to patch up wear after their recent travels, and wonders if the vehicle's condition will improve by morning. A heavy basket full of fresh bread and vegetables is thudded down on the ground and it immediately says that it is probably finally time to eat. She agrees without hesitation. Seeing the supplies, her appetite also flares up. Standing outside the van, he recalls the generosity of those they left behind, how the village elder provided plenty of food and even returned silver coins as change for the medicine they brought. She nods in support. Both are moved by the unexpected kindness of the residents. He stands outside near the camper van and lays out their supplies for dinner. When Gina offers to help start the fire, he reassures her. The internal systems of this vehicle can withstand the heat. He suggests dividing the tasks. Let Gina prepare the vegetables for the soup, and he will handle the main components. Next to it on a wooden board lie 2 loaves of dark rye bread, ready to eat. The tasty crusts are thick and rustic. Glancing at the bread, he noted, dense, heavy to the touch, and slightly sour because of this, it was not so pleasant to eat on its own. He remembered how in the village it was softened in thick, rich meat broths or topped with various additions in heaps. Inspired, he decided to show a bit of culinary ingenuity to save their dinner. At first, he carefully cuts the bread into even cubes, then heats butter in a hot pan, throws the cubes in, generously seasoning them with a pinch of what he considers magical powder, a universal seasoning from his world that adds juicy depth to the dish. While he works, she approaches with a bowl full of freshly finely chopped vegetables and asks if the portion is enough. He nods approvingly, confirming it is perfect, and asks to add them to the pot where they are already quietly simmering. The vegetables are left to simmer in the fragrant broth until they become soft. When the soup is ready, it is poured into bowls, and golden, butter-fried bread cubes are carefully placed on top as the finishing touch. The result is a hot, hearty bowl of vegetable soup Harem village, with croutons soaking in the rich-flavored broth. They settle at a small table right outside near the van and enjoy the fruits of their labor. As soon as she takes the first bite, the warmth and taste of this food give a long-awaited moment of peace on the road. She freezes with wide-open eyes, her pupils dilated, and the complex flavors of the dish dance on her taste receptors for the first time. This pleasure is born from the incredible combination of Harem village bread and soup, and she finds it so rich, as if it were a festive banquet meal. Saikyou agrees. He says the vegetables from Marina's village are especially sweet and spicy, so the dish truly turns out special. From such quality dishes, she is literally breathless. She admits that her own skill is far from this, so she almost fears to try. But Saikyou looks as if he himself did not expect his success, wonders if every time they eat, he really manages to make such delicious food. He explains that his motivation comes from her presence. If he were alone, he would be content with simple and instant cup noodles, but as soon as someone shares food with him, it pushes him to invent more. The way he mentioned cup noodles sparks a new curiosity in her, because she has never heard of such a strange idea. She cannot hold back a smile at his modesty. Nearby, a small white owl is completely absorbed in its portion, its plump body almost overflowing the bowl as it greedily eats. While they sit together by the camper, Shouju clarifies that the spices he used are real kitchen tools designed to make food more joyful. She listens attentively, impressed by how much thought and care he puts into their daily survival. A warm, sincere smile spreads across her face, and her eyes close from pure happiness as she realizes how lucky she is to share these moments. Seeing her so happy brings him deep satisfaction, and all the day's work seems worthwhile. Laughter echoes in the quiet, wild wilderness as the day begins to fade, and Shouju decides they will set up camp right here, where they stand. Even when the conversation dies down, the little owl remains composed, finishing her soup to the last drop under the darkening sky. He watched as Gina announced that she was going down to the river to wash. Shouju immediately intervened, warning that the sun was already setting, the night air would be too cold, and besides, monsters lurk in the dark. After that, he presented her with an idea completely foreign to her, a shower located right inside the camper's safety. He led her inside to explain the strange devices. He picked up a bottle and began describing it as a specialized body soap that produces thick, cleansing foam. Gina looked at the items with wide-open eyes, trying to reconcile these modern luxuries with her experience in the wild. Continuing the tour, he showed the shampoo, explaining its specific purpose for hair, and handed her a clean towel. Nodding politely, he asked her to call if any difficulties arose, then stepped outside to give her the needed privacy. In the small shop, mechanical levers were turned and water sprayed evenly from the perforated metal head. Outside, he leaned against the vehicle, and nearby a small white owl quietly circled. His thoughts revolved around how effortlessly he had offered her a shower, and whether Gina had seemed too vulnerable. Meanwhile, inside, the elf stood enchanted, captivated by what she could only describe as a rain of hot water. She stood under the stream of water, allowing the warmth to soak into her skin and wash away the dirt of the road. Steam rose around her as she closed her eyes, completely immersing herself in a rare moment of absolute calm. He appeared outside again and quietly laughed to himself, realizing that Gina would probably handle any threat that suddenly attacked. Glancing at the fluffy companion, he jokingly asked if it wanted to take a shower too, and received a soft, curious hoo-hoo in response. The little white owl flinched as the bathroom door suddenly flew open. Gina jumped out desperately wet, sobbing, shouting to Shouju that both hot and cold water had suddenly disappeared, and that she was afraid. Something terrible had happened to the electronics inside the camper. Her sudden intrusion froze him in place, his eyes wide open as he looked at the elf who stood wet, water dripping off him. Gina, in panic, initially noticed nothing, and now only began to realize the indecency of her state. Her face was burning, and in the silence slowly stretching between them, it became even more pronounced. He quickly looked away, and a dark redness crept up his neck as he stared at the wall. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. From behind, the understanding of her vulnerability finally dawned. The shock of her losing water disappeared instead. A growing, exhausting shy embarrassment overwhelmed him. A chaotic symphony of screams burst out instantly as he convulsively covered his eyes and swore he saw nothing while she fussed about looking for shelter. Even the little white owl seemed caught up in the whirlwind of their shared awkwardness. Its wings trembled, and the tension in the cramped space jumped to a feverish peak. When the first panic subsided, he went outside and, breathing out exhaustedly, explained. The water tank had simply run empty. He assured her that the camper was not broken, and the supply would be restored by morning, but his words barely eased the awkwardness still hanging in the air. While the moon hung over the quiet landscape, she remained hidden inside, bitterly lamenting what seemed to her a lack of grace, and apologizing to her mother for this turbulent, scandalous turn of events. Outside, he gently urged her to pull herself together, properly dry off, and get dressed before they continued talking. The night air settled over the rocky terrain. A distant mountain silhouette darkened against the sky, and soft clouds slowly drifted. The world was indifferent to the small drama unfolding within the metal walls of the strange wagon. She looked up at the van's roof and happily noted. The repairs were finished, and the new features worked as intended. Quietly exhaling, he called her again, asking if she had finally managed to pull herself together. He sat behind the wheel, a heavy guilt frozen on his face as he offered a sincere apology for the lack of water. He admitted that he had surprisingly forgotten about the limited capacity of the tank, while she remained silent and turned away from him, looking out the window. Continuing his internal reflections, he realized he had been careless. He had wasted too much water on everyday things like cooking and washing dishes. He hadn't even thought that she would need a whole lot for her long hair. Foolishly, he had assumed the supply was unlimited just because it was replenished every night. The burden of shame seemed to crush her spirit, and she, hunched forward, muttered that it no longer made sense to hold on to the idea of marriage at all. Seeing her so depressed, he urged her to stop these talks, warning that her current state was becoming dangerous. Then he tried to lift her spirits. He said that she has a wonderful character and is already quite beautiful. And he added that when she becomes even more attractive, men will undoubtedly line up to ask for her hand. She froze for a moment, partially covering her face, while digesting his words, and quietly asked if he really believed what he was saying. He unhesitatingly confirmed his confidence. Other men definitely would not leave someone like her alone. His words hit the mark, and for a moment she froze, confusedly sinking into thoughts. Stretching upward to touch her hair, she quietly reminded him of that previous conversation where she confessed she no longer had anyone left in her family. Standing alone in the silence of the living rooms, she explained. After her mother's death, she lived lonely, having no one else to think about. She realized that her recent behavior was probably just because she was not used to sharing her space with another person. She listened while Saikyou gently asked if she really felt better in her long-standing solitude, and his voice showed genuine concern. In response, she admitted that the time with him and the little white owlet was indeed pleasant, so he suggested that this journey might gradually help her get used to the presence of others again. A warm, sincere smile barely touched her lips as she quietly agreed. The weight of her past loneliness seemed to retreat, if only for a moment, in this moment of warmth. When the conversation died down, a heavy truck rumbled along the winding mountain road and, finally turning the corner, revealed a new destination on the horizon. Spread out in the valley below lay the stone-built city of February. The stone fortifications stood tall and formidable against the backdrop of endless open spaces. Seeing the gigantic walls, she stopped in awe at their scale, and Saikyou, noticing the travelers' bustle nearby, decided to hide the strange cart and proceed on foot to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Soon they reached the bustling entrance to the city, where guards watched the continuous flow of merchants and travelers passing through the arched stone gateway. But their attempt to blend into the crowd immediately failed. Passers-by, seeing a rare forest owl, began to whisper admiringly. Feeling the growing attention, Saikyou urgently whispered for her to hide in her hood, and that request was accepted without hesitation. She walks beside Saikyou through the bright, crowded streets of February, and only now does the city reveal its full scale. Nearby tower majestic stone buildings and towers above the noisy market, so around there is a feeling of wealth and order. Like they make their way through the crowd, Saikyou notices the incredible diversity of people here. Comparing, he says that in Odorio he never had a chance to see so many different races. Gina nods and quickly scans the crowd. Even for her, everything here is new and pressing, from stocky gnomes to bustling traders. All this together creates a wild charge of city energy. The quiet observation suddenly breaks. Nearby a commotion rises, and it is visible how a merchant aggressively pushes a customer's goods aside with his feet. Saikyou silently watches, and his face hardens as soon as he realizes the offered coin turned out to be too small. Because of this, the customer is rudely and publicly rejected. He frantically gathers his things. He turns to the source of the next quarrel. The shopkeeper roars, demanding someone leave, and insists that there is no food for their kind. Hatred in the air is palpable, a sharp contrast to the urban splendor they had just admired. The merchant's anger is directed at a beast-like lion man. He is pushed onto the cobblestones, a heavy, dull thud. Gina, confused, explains through the embarrassed Saikyou that these people belong to different tribes of beast people, wolves, birds, or sea folk, and that despite different origins, they are often grouped together, and the local places meet them with open contempt. They continue their walk, but the mood has changed. Saikyou asks why beast people are so despised. Gina admits she has not heard of such open discrimination as a common custom, so it turns out this may be an unpleasant specific feature of the culture of this particular region, and now it has finally been revealed. He reflects on the difficulties of this large city and understands, despite developed networks of information and transport, deeply rooted prejudices still thrive. It seems to him like a completely different world compared to what he heard in stories, and he remains confused by the harsh truth hidden behind the impressive walls of February. Their sad silence is broken by someone's approach. A well-dressed man in glasses comes from behind. He politely asks if they are guests of the city and if they are looking for something specific. His professional demeanor and calm voice sharply stand out against the chaotic and hostile energy of the street. He warmly welcomes them and makes it clear, if they are looking for places, the famous February Falls are a must-see. He offers his services to arrange a guide for the trip. As soon as she heard this, Gina's face lit up with pure delight. She had long dreamed of seeing the legendary waterfalls. Saikyou watches her, noting the man's words that he works in the local tourist information service. Seeing their interest, the man gestures for them to follow him and suggests moving to the information office to discuss the trip details in a more comfortable setting. Soon they reach a well-kept house. Inside it is clean and tidy. This is a center for travelers who are looking for directions in the bustling city. Once settled, the agent lays everything out clearly. The spectacle of the waterfalls is a 5-hour trek from the city gates. He emphasizes that the trail is deadly treacherous, winding through lands teeming with monsters, so professional escort is indispensable. The mention of the 5-hour journey momentarily throws Saikyou off balance, but the agent quickly recovers and reassures them. He promises to find a skilled guide who will ensure their safety before asking them to wait a moment. While they waited, a hardened warrior with a heavy blade, fastened to his belt, quickly passed by the office's presence, silently testified to the dangers lurking beyond the city walls. But the agent returns with a grim face and shows that their list of guides has emptied did not return last week. Saikyou reflects on the harshness of this world's culture, while Gina confidently asserts that she is fully capable of taking care of her own protection. He listens as the agent apologizes incessantly and explains that every certified guide has already been dispatched. The man tentatively offers an apprentice in his place, insisting that although inexperienced, he is fully capable of leading the way Seyflido Falshava. Skepticism clouds his face as he repeats apprentice over and over, questioning the wisdom of such an arrangement for a dangerous journey. Sensing hesitation, the agent promptly bows, clasps his hands together, and promises a substantial discount to sweeten the deal. Without waiting for a final answer, the man turns and shouts an order. Colette must appear immediately. From behind the counter, a small, nervous figure begins to emerge from the shadows of the back room. Her steps are light and unceasing. The apprentice steps forward and it is revealed that before the travelers stands a young beast girl with bald ears and a fluffy tail. The air in the room suddenly chills as they realize she is kept on a leash strap tightly fastened and tied around her neck, eyes fixed on the floor, and her gaze filled with pure sorrow. Stunned by the heavy silence, he and Gina freeze and stare at the child. Confusion on their faces turns into pure, unadulterated horror. The cruel reality of what is happening and the open brutality before them leaves them speechless.